Chapter 77. You've gone too far? Situ Lingxiao's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he roared, 10 great consecrators, attack! Boom! Just as Situ Lingxiao's roar faded, 10 powerful auras soared into the sky from the mansion behind the Situ family, bringing with them waves of soul ripples. A total of 10 divine soul realm experts. Not only that, several elders of the Situ family also attacked. Their auras erupted as vigorous Zhen Qi condensed behind their backs, turning into Zhen Qi wings. If the symbol of a divine soul realm expert was Zhen Qi condensing into a shape, then the symbol of a life and death chamber expert was Zhen Qi wings. Using vigorous Zhen Qi to form a pair of wings and cross the void was the greatest deterrence of a life and death chamber expert. 10 divine soul realm experts and several life and death chamber elders of the Situ family, including Situ Lingxiao, who was also a life and death chamber expert. This was the foundation of a super family, which was not something the 5 big families of the Sky River Prefecture could compare to. Hee, worthy of being a super family. However, this time we came prepared. Prince Yuani laughed and clapped his hands. Although the majority of the planning was done by the Murong family, the initial proposal was made by Prince Yuani. As the prince of a country, his shrewdness was unimaginable. Xiu! 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 In the dark night, 10 figures burst out from the dark corners. These people were the Gold Mask and Silver Mask assassins of the Bloodthirst Tower. Rumble! Many experts fought with each other. Zhen Qi surged, and Qi waves soared into the sky. The entire mansion instantly exploded, and sounds of fighting could be heard everywhere in the large Situ family. While the Gold Mask and Silver Mask assassins were making their moves, the Iron Mask assassins, including Yi Guqin, were all waiting for an opportunity to sneak into the Situ family and fight with the Situ family disciples. Yi Guqin's blood mask was like a demon from hell. He held the supreme grade blood guillotine in his hand. Wherever his sword passed, the moonlight would turn blood red. Puchi! The blood guillotine streaked across the neck of a Situ family disciple, causing blood to spurt out. A strand of essence blood was absorbed into the blood guillotine. When the blood guillotine was completely filled, Yi Guqin would obtain the opportunity to enter the 18 blood prison. And now, it was a great opportunity to replenish the flying guillotine. Although it was cruel, it was the quickest opportunity. Yi Guqin would not let it go. As the sword demon, Yi Guqin was a demon of the sword. In order to obtain the Shura sword intent, he was willing to pay any price, even if his hands were stained with blood. 3, 5, 10. In the end, human lives became meaningless numbers. Yi Guqin's black clothes were soaked in blood. At this moment, Yi Guqin's entire body was emitting an extremely strong baleful aura, just like an Azura. Yi Guqin even had an illusion that as long as he killed enough people, he would be able to comprehend the Ashura sword intent. Of course, this was just nonsense. A miserable shriek came from the front. It was an assassin from Bloodthirst Tower. One by one, experts in black robes appeared. They were the iron guards that the Situ family had carefully nurtured. There were not many of them, but their quality was very high. Their cultivation was generally above the 3rd cycle of the Qi refining realm, and their strength was not bad. These iron guards fought with the Iron Mask assassins of Bloodthirst Tower. Both sides suffered casualties. Yi Guqin's performance was too outstanding. Coupled with his iconic blood-red mask, it was difficult for him not to be targeted. It's the sword demon of Bloodthirst Tower. His name is even on the Heaven's Pride list. Kill him and let the Bloodthirst Tower know that the Situ family is not to be trifled with. A loud voice shouted. The person who spoke was the captain of the Iron Guards. He was at the 9th cycle of the Qi refining realm. Rushing Cloud Fist. The captain of the Iron Guards rushed towards Yi Guqin and threw out a punch. His true Qi surged like a galloping horse, as if it carried the power of the wind and clouds. It was aimed at Yi Guqin's face. A cold light flashed in Yi Guqin's eyes. He circulated his blood Qi and strengthened it with the power of the dragon elephant. He moved swiftly with the shadow step, dodging the attack. The flying guillotine in his hands stabbed out. Firmament palm. The captain of the Iron Guards turned his fist into a palm. His true Qi flowed endlessly like clouds. Yiguchen's body was pushed back. He couldn't help but be shocked. As expected of a super family. Even the captain of the Iron Guards had such strength. However, Yiguchen didn't use his full strength. In order to not expose his identity, Jia Chen and Yiguchen couldn't use the sword techniques that Sword Master Yiguchen had displayed. Yiguchen could only use the techniques that he hadn't used in his identity as the Sword Master. Shadow Kill Sword Art, Vanishing Shadow. Yiguchen gathered his sword aura and gathered all his essence into the flying guillotine. The flying guillotine instantly emitted a bewitching blood-red glow. Although the Shadow Kill Swordsmanship was a middle-grade spiritual level sword technique, it was not easy to comprehend it to the initial level. However, Yiguchen had already laid the foundation for the Shadow Swordsmanship, and he had the seed of Sword Heart. In addition to this period of training, Yiguchen had finally cultivated the Shadow Kill Swordsmanship to the initial level. Vanishing Shadow was the Shadow Kill Sword Art's ultimate move. Yiguchen's Vanishing Shadow drew a series of afterimages under the moonlight. It was difficult to distinguish the real from the fake. Sky-piercing Thunder Palm. The Iron Guard captain's cultivation of the 9th transformation Chi refinement realm was completely unleashed. He bombarded Yiguchen with his palm, but it directly went through his body. The palm force shattered a fake mountain behind him, sending gravel flying. Afterimage. The Iron Guard captain was shocked. He suddenly groaned. A blood-red sword tip pierced through his chest. Yiguchen pulled out his sword. Instantly, blood spurted out from the Iron Guard captain's chest. Uncle Hu! Suddenly, an angry roar with a hint of sadness sounded. A young man in the distance had killed an assassin from the Bloodthirst Tower with a punch. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but roar. It's him. Yiguchen looked at the young man. Since the target was the Situ family, Yiguchen would have done some research beforehand. He recognized the young man at a glance. He was also a famous genius of the Situ family. He was Situ Hongshue's younger brother, Situ Hechuan. At such a young age, he was already an expert of the 5th transformation Chi refinement realm. You're the sword demon of the Bloodthirst Tower. You'll pay with your life for killing Uncle Hu. Situ Hechuan's eyes were bloodshot. Although Uncle Hu was the Iron Guard captain, he was also Situ Hechuan's teacher since he was young. Although he had only been Situ Hechuan's teacher for a short while, he still had a place in Situ Hechuan's heart. Kill. Situ Hechuan swept over. His palms were like thunder, stirring up the wind and clouds. With a burst of anger, he attacked Yiguchen. At the same time, seeing the Iron Guard captain die, the surrounding Iron Guard's eyes were bloodshot. They looked at Yiguchen as if they were looking at an irreconcilable enemy. Kill him and avenge the captain. 7 Iron Guards, including Situ Hechuan, attacked at the same time. Among them, the weakest was at the 3rd transformation Chi refinement realm, while the strongest was at the 7th transformation Chi refinement realm. Not to mention Yiguchen, who was at the 9th transformation Chi refinement realm. Even a true 7th transformation Chi refinement realm prodigy might not be able to withstand so many attacks at the same time. Moreover, they attacked at the same time while Yiguchen was unprepared. Oof, the sword demon is going to die. Not far away, red-haired Ghost saw this scene and shook his head. On the other side, Nightingale saw this and remembered that Yiguchen had helped her once in the 18 Blood prison. Now, she wanted to help but was stopped by one of the Iron Guards. As for the other assassins of the Bloodthirst Tower, there was no reason for them to attack. They were cold-blooded and ruthless killers. Camaraderie did not exist in an organization like the Bloodthirst Tower. Just when everyone thought that the sword demon was about to die, Yiguchen smiled coldly under the blood-red mask. With a flip of his hand, a blood-red disc array fell into his palm. Chapter 78. This blood-red disc was the little Ashura sword formation that Yiguchen had obtained in the 18 Blood prison. Although the little Ashura sword formation was a low-grade human rank sword formation, its power was extraordinary. If it was in the hands of an expert in the Divine Soul realm, the power it could unleash would be unimaginable. Yiguchen had not reached the Divine Soul realm, and he had not even reached the Chi refining realm, so he could only infuse his profound Chi into it. Fortunately, Yiguchen's talent in sword principle was extraordinary, and the little Ashura sword formation was also a kind of sword principle. Therefore, after a lot of practice, Yiguchen could barely control 12 blood-red flying swords. As Yiguchen infused his profound chi into it, the complicated formation patterns on the blood-red disc lit up in an instant. 12 mini flying swords flashed out and turned into 12 bloody long swords in a breath. The 12 blood-red flying swords scattered in all directions, stabbing at Siddheshwan and the Iron Guards. Although Yiguchen could not fully exert the power of the little Ashura sword formation with his current realm, the 12 flying swords all contained the power of Ashura. Although the power of Ashura was not pure, Yiguchen had suffered a lot when he broke the formation. That was because Yiguchen had an extremely strong body, so he could temporarily resist the destruction of the power of Ashura. However, Siddheshwan and the Iron Guards did not have a strong body like Yiguchen. After they collided with the blood-red flying swords, the power of Ashura directly penetrated their bodies and rampaged like a fierce beast. Soon, the Iron Guards' faces were flushed, and blood was faintly flowing from the corners of their mouths. Obviously, the condition of their bodies was very bad. How could Yiguchen let go of such an opportunity? He once again used the unique skill of the shadow kill swordsmanship, Vanishing Shadow. Yiguchen's figure left behind a series of blurry afterimages. The blood-red sword edge played the dirge of death. As the blood-red sword flashed, the Iron Guards covered their throats with their hands, but they could not stop the warm blood from gushing out. In the end, all the Iron Guards were killed, and only Siddheshwan was left. When Yiguchen's cold eyes looked at Siddheshwan under the mask, Siddheshwan couldn't help but feel a chill spread through his body. However, that trace of fear was instantly buried by the hot-bloodedness of youth. Forcefully enduring the Ashura power in his body, Siddheshwan once again executed a spirit-grade martial art. Clear cloud handprint. Siddheshwan's vital energy gathered between his palms. Obviously, this was his trump card. As his vital energy surged, it vaguely turned into a cloud seal and blasted towards Yiguchen. Yiguchen sighed in his heart. Siddheshwan was Sidhu Hongshue's younger brother. If he could have retreated, Yiguchen would not have pursued him. However, he did not expect Siddheshwan to be so hot-blooded that he wanted to fight with his life on the line. "There's nothing I can do." Yiguchen sighed inwardly. His body was supported by the strength of the dragon and elephant, and the flying guillotine's sword momentum condensed. Shadow kill swordsmanship, Vanishing Shadow. A scarlet afterimage flashed past Siddheshwan's neck, and fresh blood dripped from the flying guillotine's blade. With Yiguchen's current strength and cultivation, dealing with a fifth transformation chi realm martial artist would not take too much effort. Gulp, blood gushed from Siddheshwan's throat, and his life was slowly fading away. Heshwan. Suddenly, a mournful cry that sounded like a cuckoo crying blood pierced through the night sky. A beautiful figure in a bright red wedding dress saw Siddheshwan's throat slit, and her whole body trembled and tears fell uncontrollably. It was Sidhu Hongshue who had just escaped from the inner hall. "It's you, Bloodthirst Tower's sword demon." Sidhu Hongshue's beautiful eyes looked at Yiguchen, and an indescribable hatred welled up in her eyes. Siddheshwan was her younger brother, and they had been very close since they were young. But now, she saw him die on the spot. Sidhu Hongshue suddenly pulled out Wang Ningmei, and her vital energy gushed out, and she attacked Yiguchen. "Sword demon, pay for my younger brother's life." Sidhu Hongshue attacked with the four-season swordsmanship's ultimate move. Using the swordsmanship that Yiguchen had taught her to kill Yiguchen, it was said that fate made fools of people. Yiguchen sighed inwardly. This was the scene that he didn't want to face the most. He kept the little Ashura sword formation, and executed shadow steps, suddenly retreating. "Don't run." Sidhu Hongshue's eyes were red, and her sword didn't stop moving. "Hongshue, come back." Suddenly, Murong Ditian appeared from behind, and he caught up with Sidhu Hongshue. "And you, Murong Ditian, you joined hands to harm my Sidhu family. You have to die too." Sidhu Hongshue's face was filled with tears, and she almost lost her voice as she shouted. This was too big of a blow to her. It could be imagined that a proud daughter of heaven who was originally high above had her family destroyed, and her younger brother had died in front of her eyes. Everything was unbearable for her. Murong Ditian attacked Siddhongshue's nape with his palm, causing her to faint. "Bring her out. I still have something to do." Murong Ditian handed the unconscious Situ Hongxue to Murong Ming, and then he took her away. Within the Situ family, the massacre was still ongoing. Fresh blood was like splashed ink, and it dyed every corner of the Situ family's residence red. There were many casualties in the Situ family, but there were also many casualties in the Blood Listening Tower and the Murong family. After all, it was a super family with a strong foundation. It was impossible to not pay a price for completely exterminating it. Yi Guchen's blood guillotine was almost full after the continuous massacre. His figure moved around the pavilion, and his gaze suddenly caught a flash of a figure in front of him. "It's him?" Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows slightly. The figure he saw was Prince Yuani. Around him, there were many guards attacking him. However, Prince Yuani's gaze was indifferent. The origin ring on his finger flashed, and a treasured wheel soared into the sky. This treasured wheel was multicolored, and it was like glass. As it revolved, a powerful 5-elemental true chi surged out. "That's a high-grade spiritual inscription's divine weapon." Yi Guchen, who was hiding in the dark, couldn't help but sigh. As expected of the imperial crown prince. Just this high-grade spiritual inscription's divine weapon alone could make Prince Yuani's strength leap to another level. "I'll let you have a taste of the power of the heavenly sacred 5-elemental wheel." Prince Yuani poured his true chi into it. On the heavenly sacred 5-elemental wheel, a total of 5 spiritual inscriptions lit up at the same time. They were the 5 elemental spiritual inscriptions. Then the 5 elemental power suddenly exploded, turning into streams of light. There was the sharpness of metal, the coldness of water, the explosion of fire, and so on. The surrounding guards were instantly drowned in the 5 elemental power, and screams could be heard incessantly. After dealing with the trouble, Prince Yuani directly walked into a place. Could that be the Situ family's treasury? Yi Guchen secretly guessed. However, not long after, another figure came again. It was Murong Ditian. There is indeed something fishy, Yi Guchen thought. Whether it was the Murong family or Prince Yuani, they had spent so much effort to encircle and annihilate the Situ family because there was something in the Situ family that attracted them. Something that could make them want to get it at all costs was definitely not ordinary. While Yi Guchen was pondering in his heart, an aged and gloomy voice sounded out from the depths of the Situ clan's treasure vault. "You actually targeted my Situ clan for the sake of 2 primeval sword tokens. How audacious!" Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying true chi, which was like a nuclear bomb, spread out in all directions like a huge wave, along with a dense soul energy. That kind of fluctuation was far more powerful than the power of the life and death chamber experts. A heaven and earth spirit bridge expert. Yi Guchen's eyes were filled with surprise. All of a sudden, the surrounding genuine chi surged, and the spiritual chi of heaven and earth gathered. It vaguely formed a cage, trapping the 2 of them inside. This was the power of a heaven and earth spirit bridge expert. With a raise of his hand, he could cause the heaven and earth spirit chi to resonate and explode with great power. However, in the face of death, Crown Prince Yuani and Murong Ditian didn't do anything. "Have you accepted your fate?" Ancestor Situ was not a fool. When he saw that the 2 of them had no reaction at all, his heart skipped a beat. He also sensed that something was wrong. Swish. Just then, an extremely subtle sound of wind breaking, which contained a power that even a heaven and earth spirit bridge expert couldn't ignore, slashed towards Ancestor Situ's back. Ancestor Situ suddenly leaned to the side, gathered his genuine chi, and blasted out a palm. It actually collided with the pitch-black sickle and exploded with a metallic sound. A black-robed figure suddenly retreated. It was the demon magistrate of the Blood Listening Tower. The magistrate of the Blood Listening Tower. Ancestor Situ's old face instantly darkened. The 4 magistrates of the Blood Listening Tower were infamous. They were all heaven and earth spirit bridge experts. Even Ancestor Situ didn't expect that in order to completely eradicate the Situ family, Crown Prince Yuani and the Murong family would even invite the magistrate. The price to invite the magistrate of the blood-listening tower was not cheap. Ancestor Situ, your reputation is out there. How could we not be prepared? Demon Magistrate, we will leave Ancestor Situ to you. Crown Prince Yuani and Murong Ditian looked at each other and smiled. With the Demon Magistrate entangling Ancestor Situ, they would naturally be able to enter the treasury safely. Let's go. Yiguchen didn't stay idle. Instead, he used Shadow Step and followed them inside. The treasury of a super aristocratic family was obviously not that simple. There were also many mechanisms and secret passages inside. However, Crown Prince Yuani was relaxed. The heavenly sacred 5 elements will revolve continuously above his head. Waves of 5 elements power burst out, obliterating all the hidden weapons and mechanisms. Yiguchen, who was hiding in the dark, saw this scene and pondered in his heart. My current identity is the Sword Devil of the Blood-Listening Tower. If I fight for the immemorial sword token with them, even if I obtain it, there will be trouble in the future. Why don't I search for other treasures first and wait for them to come out with the immemorial sword token before making a decision? Yiguchen's eyes flickered as he made a decision. His decision was obviously correct. Regardless of whether it was Crown Prince Yuani or Murong Ditian, they weren't interested in the other items in the treasury because these items weren't considered rare in the Murong family and the Imperial family. They only had one goal, and that was the immemorial sword token in the deepest part of the treasury. Yiguchen followed another passage into a side room and began to search for the items he needed. Very quickly, Yiguchen found a special secret room. He could vaguely feel a strange fluctuation coming from the secret room. This fluctuation? Yiguchen suddenly stopped in his tracks. He wasn't unfamiliar with this fluctuation because he had also sensed it from the Calamity Dust Sword. This was the fluctuation of a spiritual pattern. If Yiguchen wanted to forge a flexible sword, spiritual patterns were essential. In the Situ family's treasury, there was obviously no lack of such things. Just as Yiguchen opened the secret room, a fist the size of a bowl came out with a loud bang. Yiguchen blocked with his sword in front of him. A majestic force caused Yiguchen to take a few steps back. A figure whose entire body was cyan in color stared at Yiguchen with numb and stiff eyes as he stuttered, "Those who aren't from the Situ family. Kill." Puppet. Yiguchen immediately reacted. However, it was reasonable to place a puppet in this kind of treasury. This puppet's strength was extremely great and was probably able to contend against experts at the peak of qi refining. Unfortunately, Yiguchen also cultivated his physical body and also had the strength of a dragon elephant. In terms of physical strength, he wasn't much weaker than this puppet. Moreover, Yiguchen could use sword arts. A puppet of this level, other than using its fists and legs to attack, had no other methods. Even a super family didn't have the qualifications to have a puppet that could use martial arts. Yiguchen's lips curled into a faint smile. There was no one else here, so Yiguchen could use his methods to his heart's content. With a flip of his hand, the Calamity Dust Sword appeared in his hand again. At that moment, Yiguchen was holding the flying guillotine in his left hand and the Calamity Dust in his right. I haven't used that move for a long time. I wonder if I'm rusty. Yiguchen's lips curled into a smile, and both of his hands attacked at the same time. Chapter 80. 2 streaks of sword light, one blood red and the other cold, attacked the puppet at the same time. Clang. The 2 swords hit the puppet's body, emitting a clear metallic sound. Yiguchen wielded the 2 swords in a very natural and smooth manner. There was not the slightest bit of hindrance. For a moment, the puppet seemed to be attacked by 2 sword cultivators at the same time. The sword wounds on its body gradually increased. Yiguchen had never used this move before. Now that he had 2 swords in his hands, he directly used it. It was the left and right interfighting technique. The left and right interfighting technique was created by the old urchin, a top-notch expert in the pugilistic world. Although the old urchin wasn't one of the top 10 experts, his martial arts had reached the peak. The left and right interfighting technique was learned by the old urchin after the sword demon Duguubai defeated everyone in the world. He was lonely and learned the old urchin's technique. He used the left and right swords to fight with each other to relieve his boredom. However, after practicing the left and right interfighting technique for a long time, Yiguchen's cultivation of the two swords had reached the point of perfection. He had even comprehended an even more powerful move. Dual sword divergence. Yiguchen's essence was fully raised, and he used the two sword moves at the same time. He held the blood guillotine in his left hand and used the Aurora Quicksword's minor skill, Aurora's Passing. His right hand held the Calamity Dust sword and used the minor skill, Lightning Flash. The two Xiantian sword moves were used at the same time. A blood-red light intertwined with a dazzling lightning. The two minor skills overlapped each other, and their power multiplied. They directly bombarded the puppet's body. The puppet's body crashed into the wall of the secret room. Its body was torn apart, and its chest caved in. The surroundings were charred black. With the dual sword divergence, Yiguchen defeated the puppet in one move. If other sword cultivators saw this scene, they would be so shocked that they couldn't close their mouths. There were sword cultivators who practiced dual swords, but to use two sword moves at the same time, and both were minor skills of the Xiantian sword arts, the difficulty was simply unimaginable. Moreover, a swordsman was right-handed. Using the sword with his left hand would definitely be inflexible. Even if he was left-handed, his right hand would definitely be inflexible, making it difficult for him to execute skillful sword moves. However, Yiguchen had relied on his experience in the left and right interfighting technique to comprehend the dual sword divergence. He was able to separate his left and right hands to execute their respective moves. If Yiguchen were to display two innate stage sword moves at the same time, it would still be acceptable even though the power was strong. Then in the future, when Yiguchen's cultivation level increased, he would be able to use two spirit-level sword moves at the same time, or even more powerful sword moves. At that time, the power of the dual sword divergence would reach a terrifying level. This was a move with unlimited potential. At the same time, it was also Yiguchen's trump card. It could be imagined that if Yiguchen's opponent suddenly discovered that Yiguchen could wield the sword with both hands, and that he was extremely skilled in both, then it would be like fighting against two Yiguchen. Obviously, this would bring a huge surprise to Yiguchen's opponent. After getting rid of the puppet, Yiguchen looked around the entire secret room. There were not many things in the secret room. There was only a stone platform, and on the stone platform, there were many spirit seals. Spirit seals were the carriers of spirit runes. When forging a Spirit Rune Divine Weapon, as long as the Spirit Rune Divine Weapon was integrated with the Spirit Rune Divine Weapon, the Spirit Rune Divine Weapon would naturally be engraved on the weapon, displaying its unique ability. Moreover, spirit seals were usually forged by experts above the life and death threshold. The higher the cultivation level, the stronger the spirit seal's attribute would be. There were a total of 5 spirit seals on the stone platform. Yiguchen did not understand these spirit seals, so he simply put them all into his origin ring. After obtaining the spirit seals, Yiguchen only needed one last material to forge the flexible sword: rare heaven and earth flame. Unfortunately, Yiguchen went to the other rooms of the treasury to search, but he did not find any rare heaven and earth flame. It seemed that the Situ family's treasury did not have any rare heaven flames. Although rare heaven and earth flames were not as rare as the immemorial sword, they were still rare items. Without a certain amount of luck, one might not necessarily find them. Yiguchen did not have much hope. Being able to obtain a spirit seal was already good enough. However, Yiguchen did find a crystal jade secret room. After defeating the puppet guarding the secret room, Yiguchen also obtained a considerable amount of crystal jades. There were a total of 50,000 crystal jades. This was only a small secret room of the Situ family. There should be a large number of crystal jades hidden in other places. However, Yiguchen did not have much time to search. This was because he sensed that there were waves of fluctuations coming from the depths of the treasury. It's the fluctuations of an array? Yiguchen pondered. With the importance of the immemorial sword token, it seemed reasonable that there was an array protecting it. Yiguchen's eyes dimmed. Using the shadow step, he turned into an obscure afterimage and escaped into the depths of the treasury. However, in the depths of the treasury, A circular array exploded with divine radiance. Rays of aura soared into the sky. Although it was only a low-grade mortal-grade array, every ray of aura was enough to kill a third transformation chi refinement expert. Within the array, there were more than 100 rays of aura. They intertwined with each other and whistled. They were extremely powerful. Prince Yuani and Murong Ditian were both trapped in the array. Above Prince Yuani's head, the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel revolved continuously. The 5 spirit patterns emitted a glaring radiance. The power of the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth gathered and formed a 5-element light shield, enveloping Prince Yuani within. Murong Ditian held the sword wrapped in bandages on his back in his hand. Although he did not untie it, the sword vibrated and exploded with boundless sword chi, scattering the aura in the surroundings. Yiguchen, who was in the dark, squinted his eyes slightly. No matter if it was Prince Yuani or Murong Ditian, they were both difficult opponents. Murong Ditian's sword, which had never revealed its true appearance, gave Yiguchen a faint sense of danger. That sword was definitely not ordinary. Even the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel did not give Yiguchen such a feeling. It seems that Murong Ditian is a strong opponent in the 10 prefectures elite assembly. Yiguchen thought to himself. Brother Murong, let's not hide anymore. Who knows what other tricks that old man Siddhu has. Prince Yuani's face was like jade. He was very handsome. Even though he was trapped in the array, he still had a smile on his face. Alright, Your Highness, let's attack together and destroy this array. Murong Ditian nodded. Both of them attacked with all their might. Prince Yuani raised his hand slightly, and the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel suddenly exploded with a glaring radiance. The mighty power of the 5 elements gathered on Prince Yuani's arm like rivers returning to the sea. He used a spirit-grade martial art right away. 5 elements king subduing fist. Prince Yuani punched out, and the power of the 5 elements suddenly exploded. It was like 5 mountains destroying the array patterns on the ground. Murong Ditian attacked at the same time, and he swung his sword down. The surging sword chi seemed to have come from the 9 heavens. What he used was the Murong family's other spirit-level sword art, the Heaven's Exhaustion sword art. Boom! The 2 moves landed at the same time, and the violent vibrations spread in all directions. The entire treasury seemed to be rumbling. Amidst the smoke and dust, rocks flew everywhere. Even though the ground was paved with hard basalt, it was still difficult for it to withstand the extreme moves of the 2. Killing array, destroyed. As the array dissipated, a stone platform was clearly reflected in their eyes. On the stone platform, there were 2 items that were completely black. They looked like tokens, but from their shape they looked like small black swords. Prince Yuani and Murong Ditian looked at each other, and there was an indescribable look in their eyes. For a moment, the atmosphere was a little strange. Chapter 81. Although Prince Yuani and the Murong family were in a cooperative relationship, they were both wary of each other. Moreover, what they wanted was the immemorial sword token, which was of utmost importance. Although they had an agreement before the plan started, most of the time, wasn't an agreement meant to be broken? Brother Murong, according to our agreement, the Imperial family and the Murong family will each take one of these 2 immemorial sword tokens. We can study them together in the future and decipher their hidden secrets together. Prince Yuani broke the silence with a faint smile. That's how it should be. Murong Ditian's taut bowstring also relaxed slightly. Although he was confident in his own strength, Prince Yuani was the crown prince of the Saint Origin dynasty. How could he not have some tricks up his sleeve? If the 2 of them were to fight, neither of them would have the upper hand. It was obviously not the right time to fall out with each other. Prince Yuani also thought of this, so he didn't do anything. The 2 of them took 1 immemorial sword token each, smiled at each other, and left the treasury. Yiguchen followed behind him. In the Siddhu family, Yiguchen couldn't make a move because he was afraid that something might happen. If he was discovered, it would be difficult for him to switch between the identities of Yiguchen and Sword Demon. Outside the Siddhu family's treasury, it was a mess. The ground was full of cracks, and the surrounding pavilions had collapsed. The demon magistrate and old ancestor Siddhu were fighting non-stop. It was very difficult to kill an expert of the heaven and earth spiritual bridge level. However, the demon magistrate's mission was only to stall old ancestor Situ, not to kill him. Seeing Prince Yuani and Murong Ditien appear, old ancestor Situ was furious. However, under the demon magistrate's entanglement, he couldn't deal with them. Today, you destroyed my Situ family. I'll make sure you never have peace in the future, old ancestor Situ said with a ferocious expression. If a heaven and earth spiritual bridge level expert targeted him, he would definitely not be able to eat or sleep in peace. However, Prince Yuani shook his head with a smile and said, Old ancestor Situ, the imperial family has many experts. Why would we be afraid of your harassment? If you don't, I'll send the imperial family's experts to kill you. Prince Yuani was like a smiling tiger. Although he was smiling, his words were cold and sharp. Ignorant brat, you will pay the price one day. Patriarch Situ's turbid old eyes were filled with murderous intent, but with the demon judge pestering him, there was nothing he could do. Brother Murong, this matter is over. Let's go. Crown Prince Yuani said. Murong Ditien nodded slightly, and the two of them flew out of the Situ clan. Yi Guchen was still following behind him like a ghost. At this moment, the enormous Situ clan had long since been engulfed in flames, and the sounds of battle resounded incessantly. As a super family, they had a large population and many experts. Naturally, it was impossible to annihilate them in a short period of time. In a manner outside the Situ residence, Murong Ming looked at Situ Hongxue, who had fainted and collapsed on the ground, and swallowed his saliva. He was already a playboy by nature. Now that he saw a beauty like Situ Hongxue, how could he not be envious? However, Situ Hongxue was Murong Ditien's exclusive property. Even if Murong Ming was given 100 guts, he would not dare to do anything to Situ Hongxue. Whoosh, whoosh. Two whooshing sounds suddenly resounded. Murong Ming's vision blurred, and two figures appeared in front of him. They were Crown Prince Yuani and Murong Ditien. Big brother, you are finally here, Murong Ming said. Murong Ditien nodded slightly. Looking at Situ Hongxue, who had collapsed on the ground, there was a trace of complacency in his eyes. Situ Hongxue, such a fairy-like beauty, had finally landed in his hands. Now, in the Situ clan, other than that old ancestor Situ, there is probably only Situ Hongxue left, Crown Prince Yuani said indifferently with his hands behind his back. Hongxue's life belongs to me. As for the other people in the Situ clan, even if they all die, it has nothing to do with me, Murong Ditien said indifferently. Haha, even heroes have a weakness for beauties. Crown Prince Yuani shook his head and laughed. Clang. Just at this moment, without warning, a sword light pierced towards Murong Ditien at an unimaginable speed, as though it was a remnant shadow that reaped lives. Only when it was 10 feet away from Murong Ditien did Murong Ditien feel goosebumps all over his body. He had never experienced such a feeling before. He hurriedly moved the long sword that was sealed behind him. However, the sword light that was sneak attacking him actually deviated slightly and pierced towards Murong Ditien's left hand. In the origin ring on Murong Ditien's left hand's finger, there was an immemorial sword token. Murong Ditien let out a miserable cry. A bloody light flashed on his left hand, and a finger flew into the air. That finger with the origin ring was directly absorbed by a figure that soared into the air. Although this series of actions seemed to take a long time, it only happened in a short breath's time. No one would have thought that someone would make a move at this moment. It's you. After seeing the appearance of the person who came, Murong Ditien's eyes instantly turned blood red. That figure, that handsome face. To Murong Ditien, it was a heart demon, a nightmare. Sword Sexy Guchen. If he wanted to make a move against Prince Yuani and Murong Ditien, he obviously couldn't use the identity of Blood Listening Tower's Sword Devil. Therefore, the current Yi Guchen had already removed the Sword Devil's mask and black clothes and returned to his original identity. He had been tailing behind Murong Ditien and the others. Only when he arrived at this manor and saw Situ Hongxue, did Yi Guchen make the decision to make a move. The reason why he chose Murong Ditien was because Yi Guchen wasn't familiar with Prince Yuani and didn't have much confidence. However, if they were to truly fight, he wasn't afraid at all. Oh, Yi Guchen. Is it that sword sex Yiguchen whose name has spread through the entire Beichen manor recently? Prince Yuani raised his eyebrows and looked at Yiguchen in astonishment. Yiguchen, you are actually here? Murong Ditian clenched his teeth, and his left hand was still bleeding. I was invited by Situ Hongxue to attend the wedding banquet. Yiguchen lied. He naturally couldn't reveal his identity as the Sword Devil. Murong Ditian was stunned. Shortly after, a strong viciousness surged in his eyes. He believed Yiguchen's words because Situ Hongxue had left it behind at the sword-seeking stele. Obviously, she was waiting for Yiguchen. If it was any other man, they wouldn't be able to tolerate their exclusive possession being tainted by others. You've come at the right time. Today, I shall end you. Murong Ditian swung his sword. Although his sword hadn't been unsealed, it still exploded with sword chi. Sword sex Yiguchen, although I really want to be friends with you, it's a pity that you know the secret of the immemorial sword token. The immemorial sword token isn't something that anyone can taint. Prince Yuani also made a move. The heavenly sacred 5-element wheel flashed and released 5-colored divine light. Facing the pincer attack of the two young experts, Yiguchen's eyes darkened. He knew that it wasn't a good time to fight for a long time. If the experts of the Murong family or the Beichen Manor's chief returned to help, he wouldn't have the chance to escape. Therefore, after making up his mind, Yiguchen decided to use his trump card. Chapter 82. Mysterious devouring power circulated within Yiguchen's body as a powerful suction force suddenly spread out from his body. It was the spirit-devouring secret art he had obtained from the 18-blood prison heaven-devouring beast. This was the first time Yiguchen had used the spirit-devouring secret art in a battle. At this moment, Yiguchen's body was like a bottomless black hole, constantly absorbing the surrounding Ling Qi. The upper limit of the spirit-devouring secret art was the physical body. The stronger the physical body, the more Ling Qi it could absorb. Yiguchen's physical body was definitely stronger than an ordinary person's. Therefore, when he used the spirit-devouring secret art, the amplification he received was even stronger. Secret art? Even Prince Yuani's expression changed slightly when he felt Yiguchen's aura erupting like a geyser. The royal family did not lack secret arts that could temporarily increase one's strength, but those secret arts had a limited amplification. It was impossible for them to increase one's strength as much as Yiguchen's. Attack! Prince Yuani and Murong Ditian looked at each other with tacit understanding. Gung metal sword chi. Prince Yuani pointed with his sword. The metal spirit runes engraved on the heavenly sacred 5-element will suddenly erupted with dazzling golden light. A beam of golden sword chi shot out from the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel and blasted towards Yiguchen. Murong Ditian, on the other hand, immediately used his ultimate move. He brandished his sword, and 8 streaks of sword chi shot towards Yiguchen as if they could split the heavens and split the earth. Each streak of sword chi was enough to casually kill an ordinary chi refinement realm martial artist. It was the little ultimate move of the mysterious heaven sword art, Sword Sweep 8 Desolation. Facing the attacks of 2 young experts at the same time, even the Heaven Prides on the Heaven Prides list would find it difficult to withstand. However, Yiguchen smiled casually. He felt the power in his body that had nowhere to go, but he was not afraid at all. With the amplification of the spirit-devouring secret art, Yiguchen's current strength was no weaker than any 7th Revolution Chi refinement cultivator. The soul-devouring secret skill had almost raised Yiguchen's cultivation by a whole realm. Of course, this was also because Yiguchen's current cultivation was only in the essential Qi realm. If he were in the Qi refining realm, the effect would not be so obvious. Yiguchen's tribulation dust sword edge cleansed, and a majestic true Qi spread out like a tide. Behind him, an illusory sea appeared. Above the sea, a bright moon rose into the sky, bringing with it unparalleled sword chi. The ultimate move of the piercing moon swordsmanship, Sea Rising Bright Moon. Yiguchen, who was enveloped by the bright moon of sword chi, collided with the attacks of the 2 people. Boundless sword chi spread out in all directions. The ground of the manor split open, the surrounding walls collapsed, and the rockery crumbled. Murong Ming was so scared that he hastily dragged Situ Hongxue away. Such strength. Prince Yuani's usually calm expression changed completely. Although he had long heard of Yi Guqin's achievements from the sword sect, hearing about it was one thing, and personally fighting with him was another. Looking at the bright moon of sword qi that seemed invulnerable, Prince Yuani felt that the name of the sword sect was indeed true. After exchanging blows, Yi Guqin was actually not at a disadvantage against the two of them. Damn it, how did his strength increase so much? Your Highness, we only need to delay him. Murong Ditian's expression became even more unsightly. Yi Guqin had already become his inner demon. Only by personally removing this thorn in his flesh could his path of the sword be smooth. But now, Murong Ditian actually felt that Yi Guqin's strength was not inferior to his at all. Murong Ditian raised his sword high. Although it was not unsealed, the sword qi still spread out. Great splashing wind sword, wind god's howl. Accompanied by Murong Ditian's shout, thousands of sword qi soared into the sky like a gale. Then, they all gathered together, as if they were the center of a tornado. Although the great splashing wind sword was only the Murong family's Xiantian sword technique, this move was a great killing move. In other words, Murong Ditian had already cultivated the great splashing wind sword to the great accomplishment stage. I also have a great accomplishment stage sword technique. The calamity dust in Yi Guqin's hand shook, and then suddenly swept out. It was extremely dazzling. Aura Quick Sword's great killing move, Dawnbreak. A sword shadow that was like the light of the sky tore apart the darkness. Boom! The two great killing moves collided, and an extremely strong vibration force spread out like a wave, causing the void to shake. Heavenly Fire Seal. Just as Yi Guqin and Murong Ditian swords collided, Crown Prince Yuani made his move once again. On the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel, the fire spirit patterns lit up. The entire 5-element wheel instantly shone with a fiery light, and waves of blazing fire energy gathered in Crown Prince Yuani's palm. He struck out with his palm, and the power of fire condensed into a heavenly fire seal, pressing towards Yi Guqin's back. Yi Guqin executed the Willow Catkin wind movement technique and raised his sword, forcing Murong Ditian to retreat. Then he changed his sword art again, and the sword cut through the void like the trajectory of the Great Thousand World, making it hard to grasp. Then these sword trajectories overlapped, forming a sword wheel. Great Thousand Wheel. Yi Guqin's sword landed, and the Great Thousand Wheel that overlapped with each other blasted towards Prince Yu. Small accomplishment stage spirit sword technique. The corner of Prince Yuani's eyes twitched, and he quickly changed his move. 5 Elements King Subduing Fist. On the heavenly sacred 5 Elements wheel, the 5 spiritual patterns emitted a blinding divine light at the same time, and then the power of the 5 elements was added to Prince Yuani's hand. He punched out, and 5-colored divine light shone, colliding with the Great Thousand Wheel. Even with Prince Yuani's strength, he grunted, and a few cracks appeared on the hand he used to punch, and blood flowed out. Yi Guqin knew that he couldn't delay any longer. He gathered all the power in his body, and hundreds of green sword qi scuttled out of his body like fish. Every green sword qi carried an extremely sharp aura. They were the heaven-splitting sword souls that Yi Guqin had obtained from Yi Tianxing's heavenly path sword realm. Originally, with Yi Guqin's current cultivation, he could only release over 100 heaven-splitting sword souls at the same time. However, after executing the spirit-devouring secret technique, Yi Guqin could now release 300 heaven-splitting sword souls. 300 heaven-splitting sword souls. Although they didn't have the power to destroy the sky like they did in the Heavenly Path Sword realm, they were still extremely terrifying. Everywhere they passed, the fake mountains and pavilions collapsed, turning into countless pieces. What kind of technique is this? Prince Yuani and Murong Ditian were a little surprised. The hundreds of sword qi were like living creatures. They flew around the void, and split into two, and attacked Murong Ditian and Prince Yuani respectively. No matter how strong they were, they couldn't withstand the continuous attacks of hundreds of sword qi, let alone the fact that the heaven-splitting sword souls could enter their bodies and cause damage. Murong Ditian and Prince Yuani were both hit. The heaven-splitting sword souls were rampaging in their bodies, and even with their vital qi, they couldn't suppress them. Soon, the two of them coughed up blood. Yi Guchen saw the opportunity and moved his feet. Like the wind, he rushed towards Murong Ming, who was hiding in the distance. Seeing Yi Guchen rushing over, Murong Ming was scared out of his wits. He had a conflict with Yi Guchen before. At this moment, how could he care about Sidu Hongxue? He ran away as if he was running for his life. Seeing this, Yi Guchen didn't chase after him. Instead, he grabbed Sidu Hongshue's delicate body and suddenly left. Leave Hongxue behind. Murong Ditian's expression changed drastically, and he almost couldn't help but release the seal on the sword in his hand. However, when he thought of the price he had to pay, he held it in for the time being. He only clenched his teeth, and blood seeped out from his lips. After Yi Guchen's figure gradually disappeared into the distance, the sky-splitting sword soul in their bodies also rushed out and disappeared into the void. Yi Guchen, there will be a day when I will kill you. From afar, Yi Guchen heard Murong Ditian's furious roar, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Chapter 83. Taking away Sidu Hongxue and obtaining Murong Ditian's immemorial sword token at the same time. Yi Guchen also felt that if he were in Murong Ditian's shoes, he would also be infuriated. However, with Murong Ditian's narrow-mindedness, they were destined to be on opposite sides with no room for reconciliation. Since that was the case, what couldn't they do? Moreover, the immemorial sword token contained a huge secret that was similarly attractive to Yi Guchen. He naturally wouldn't miss out on it. After a bloody night, the next day, the entire firmament city was filled with the thick smell of blood. It was impossible for the outside world not to know about the huge commotion within the Situ family. However, with such a huge commotion, no one had the time to investigate. If they were to poke their nose into other people's business, they might be implicated and end up smashing their own feet. The final result was that the huge Situ family, with thousands of people, other than Ancestor Situ who was injured and fled, no one survived. Corpses piled up into mountains and blood flowed like rivers, dyeing the surrounding land dark red. However, Blood Listening Tower and Murong family also paid a price. Blood Listening Tower lost a golden-masked assassin and 4 silver-masked assassins. That was 1 life and death threshold expert and 4 divine soul experts. Close to half of the 50 iron-masked assassins also died. The Murong family had also lost a few of their elders, and many of their disciples were either dead or injured. Even Beichen Mansion's mansion master suffered heavy injuries and immediately went into seclusion to recuperate after the encirclement ended. From this, it could be seen that the price to completely exterminate a superfamily was definitely not light. In a room on the 2nd floor of an inn near the most remote part of Firmament City, Situ Hongxue quietly lay on the bed. Although her eyes were closed, her brows were tightly knitted. Beads of sweat appeared on her snow-white skin as she muttered something. "Father! Little brother!" Situ Hongxue suddenly lost her voice. Her jade-like hand suddenly stretched out and tightly grabbed Yi Guchen's arm. Yi Guchen frowned slightly and didn't say anything. Situ Hongxue suddenly opened her beautiful eyes. Tears were flowing in her pitch-black eyes. "Yi Guchen?" Situ Hongxue was puzzled for a moment. She didn't seem to understand why Yi Guchen was here. Then, she suddenly thought of something and grabbed Yi Guchen's arm tightly. "Young Master Yi, how is my family's situation?" Father, mother, and little, Situ Hongxue was suddenly speechless. In her memory, that nightmarish scene appeared again. The assassin with the blood-red mask was like the Grim Reaper. With a slash of his sword, blood spurted out from Situ Heshuan's neck. "It's him, the sword demon of Bloodlust Tower. He killed my little brother." Situ Hongshue's eyes were filled with deep resentment. Yi Guchen clenched his fists slightly before releasing them. His gaze shifted to the side. Did he regret it? Yi Guchen asked himself, but unfortunately he didn't. He only felt a little helpless about killing Situ Heshuan, but he didn't regret it. He was the sword demon. In order to complete the mission and obtain the Azura sword will, he was willing to pay any price. But at this moment, Situ Hongshue's teary eyes made him hesitate. Had he gone too far because of his obsession with the sword Dao? But in the next moment, Yi Guchen immediately rejected this idea. His pursuit of the sword Dao had always been his top priority. Otherwise, he wouldn't have joined an assassin organization like Bloodlust Tower. What happened to my father, mother, and the entire Situ family? Situ Hongxue was particularly fragile at this moment. Her eyes were red and she clutched Yi Guchen's sleeve tightly. Apart from you and the injured ancestor Situ, no one in the entire Situ family survived. Yi Guchen sighed and finally told the truth. Situ Hongxue shuddered and sparkling tears fell uncontrollably. Dead, they're all dead. Father, mother, little brother, it's all because of them. Prince Yuani, Chief Beichen, the Murong family, and Bloodlust Tower. Situ Hongxue lowered her head and clenched her jade-like hands so tightly that her knuckles turned white. It was easy to imagine that the high and mighty Situ family's beloved daughter, who was the center of attention, had lost everything in just one night. It was hard for anyone to accept such a fall from heaven to hell, let alone Situ Hongxue, who was only a woman in her 20s. Yi Guchen didn't know what to say when he saw this. He wanted to comfort her, but he felt that it would be too hypocritical of him to comfort her after he killed her little brother with his own hands. Suddenly, Yi Guchen felt an aura emanating from Situ Hongxue's body. That aura was filled with darkness, negativity, hatred, and resentment. Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows. It reminded him of the rumor of being possessed by a demon in the pugilistic world from his previous life. When a person's heart was filled with all kinds of negative emotions, they would have no regrets even if they were possessed by a demon in order to achieve their goal of revenge. Yi Guchen, please teach me swordsmanship. I can only take revenge if I become stronger. Situ Hongxue suddenly raised her head. Yi Guchen looked over and his heart trembled slightly. He saw that there were tears of blood flowing from the corners of Situ Hongxue's eyes. Her tears were like fresh blood as they meandered down her smooth and tender face. Even so, Yi Guchen closed his eyes and opened them again. He said calmly, "My current cultivation is not as high as yours. How can I be your master? I don't care. As long as you can teach me swordsmanship and give me the right to take revenge." Situ Hongxue's tone was bone-piercing. Yi Guchen hardened his heart and shook his head with a sigh. Afterwards, no matter if it was Yi Guchen reporting back to Blood Listening Tower, entering the 18-blood prison, or entering the ice-fire broken cliff to break through his cultivation, these were all secrets that could not be leaked. Bringing along Situ Hongxue, it was obviously inconvenient for him to move around. Moreover, what Yi Guchen said was indeed true. Although he could teach Situ Hongxue in the way of the sword, in terms of cultivation, he really could not teach her at all. And it was not only swordsmanship that measured a person's strength. Seeing Yi Guchen reject like this, Situ Hongxue's originally pale face became even more bloodless. Her lips, which were as white as paper, trembled slightly. After a long time, Situ Hongxue wiped away her tears of blood and revealed a thin smile. She said, "No matter what, I still have to thank young Master Yi for saving me from Murong Ditian's hands. I will definitely repay you in the future." Situ Hongxue stood up and was about to leave. "Where are you going next?" Yi Guchen sighed and asked. "To any place that can make me stronger. There will be a day when I will kill all of them." Situ Hongxue tightly clenched her jade-like hands, her fingernails slightly piercing into her palms as blood dripped down from the gaps between her fingers. All of them naturally included Blood Listening Tower's sword demon. If my identity is leaked in the future, could it be that I will also have to have a life and death battle with Situ Hongxue? Yi Guchen could not help but think in his heart. After Situ Hongxue left, Yi Guchen was somewhat absent-minded. This was what it meant to be played by fate. But in an instant, Yi Guchen calmed down. After all, he was the sword demon who had once ruled the world with his sword. How could he be affected by such emotions? He adjusted his state of mind and took out the origin ring on Murong Ditian's severed finger. What made Yi Guchen slightly disappointed was that there was nothing in the origin ring other than the immemorial sword token. It was very obvious that Murong Ditian's origin ring was only used to store the immemorial sword token. Let me see what's so special about this immemorial sword token. Yi Guchen took out the immemorial sword token. The entire sword token was pitch black and deep. It was unknown what material it was made of, but there was a vague, strange beast engraved on its surface. This strange beast is... Yiguchen frowned as he vaguely felt that it was somewhat familiar. Suddenly, Yiguchen was stunned as he felt that the devouring power in his body was slightly stirred. Devouring power? Could this strange beast be the immemorial Taoi? Yiguchen was really surprised. Could there really be such a coincidence? When he was refining the heaven-devouring beast's demonic pill in the 18-blood prison, he had faintly seen a vague illusion. A vague figure killed the immemorial Taotai, forged the immemorial famous sword, and imparted the heaven-devouring secret technique. Thinking of this, even with Yiguchen's composure, he could not help but breathe rapidly. Could it really be related to the immemorial famous sword? Chapter 84. When Yiguchen first heard about the immemorial sword token, although he guessed that it might be related to the immemorial sword, he wasn't very sure. This was because the immemorial sword was too rare. It was a divine weapon that could shake heaven and earth. If it were to appear, it would definitely stir up an endless storm. All the super dynasties, mysterious ancient sects, ancient sacred grounds, and so on would definitely take action. This was because as long as one could obtain an immemorial sword, they would be able to suppress 10,000 years of luck and become an invincible sword expert. However, because it was too rare, Yiguchen wasn't sure if the immemorial sword token was real or fake. After all, it was too unbelievable to find traces of an immemorial sword in a small place like the Saint Origin dynasty. However, based on the memory that Yiguchen extracted from the sky-devouring beast's monster core, this immemorial sword token was definitely related to the demon sword that was made from the immemorial Taoi. Vaguely, Yiguchen felt as if he had uncovered a corner of the immemorial sword. Although I didn't know much about it before, I heard that the immemorial sword token was obtained in the everlasting flatland. Yiguchen thought to himself. The everlasting flatland was an infinitely vast territory within the Saint Origin dynasty. The North River Sword King Chu Donglio's Sword King's secret realm was first discovered in the everlasting flatland. However, the Sword King's secret realm was only at the periphery of the everlasting flatland. There were endless dangers in the everlasting flatland, but there were also many secret realms, treasure grounds, and caves. No one could explain why there were so many secret realms in the everlasting flatland. Could it be because of the immemorial sword that so many experts died in the everlasting flatland? Yiguchen guessed. This might be a possibility. However, he didn't know enough and didn't have the ability to search for it. He had only obtained one immemorial sword token. The imperial family and Prince Yuani had a total of 2. Although the Murong family's token was obtained by Yiguchen, there was still another one in the family. Yiguchen didn't know if there were any other immemorial sword tokens. Therefore, even if Yiguchen had some clues now, it was impossible for him to search for the famed primordial sword. However, Yiguchen believed that when the time came, the famed ancient sword would not be willing to remain silent. Right now, the only thing Yiguchen needed to do was to raise his own strength. Strength was the only way to go. Otherwise, even if he obtained the ancient famed sword, he wouldn't have the ability to control and refine it. Yiguchen temporarily put the matter of the immemorial sword token to the bottom of his heart and sorted out what he had to do next. Next, I'll have to report back to Bloodhark Tower. The flying guillotine has been filled, but before that, I need to make a breakthrough. Yiguchen pondered his next steps. After the battle with the Sidhu family, Yiguchen's flying guillotine had finally absorbed enough blood essence, reaching the requirements to enter the 18-blood prison. However, the 18-blood prison was extremely dangerous. In order to be confident, Yiguchen still needed to enter the Cloud Valley mountain range and use the ice fire Yin Yang Tan to completely overcome the blood tribulation of the physical body and achieve a perfect physical body. Then, he would break through to the Qi refinement realm. If he entered the Qi refinement realm, Yiguchen's chances of entering the 18-blood prison would be even greater. The 10 Prefectures elite gathering was also not far away. In order to deal with Xia Yubing's sword intent, Yiguchen also needed to obtain the inheritance of the Azura sword intent. Cloud Valley Mountain Range, Ice Fire Cliff. After completing his mission, Yiguchen also directly returned to this place. To others, the Ice Fire Cliff was a land of death, but to Yiguchen, it was an absolute land of treasures. Yiguchen had a premonition that if he succeeded this time, his strength would rapidly increase. At that time, in the 10 prefectures elite gathering, even Xia Yubing, who had obtained the inheritance of the North River Sword King, would be trampled under his feet. At the entrance of the cliff, the power of raging flames and extreme cold continuously emitted, causing half of the surrounding mountain rocks to be charred black, and the other half covered in ice and snow. Yiguchen did not hesitate in the slightest, directly jumping in. Under the ice-fire cliff, the ice-fire yin-yang tan was like a Tai Chi diagram at the bottom. The power of ice and fire were clearly separated, mutually restraining each other, yet coexisting in harmony. At the beginning, Yiguchen did not pay much attention to it, but now, it seemed that how this ice-fire yin-yang tan was formed was a mystery. There must be a reason for this kind of secret realm of heaven and earth to be formed. But there was no special geographical environment around the ice-fire cliff. Could it be that there is something at the bottom of this ice-fire yin-yang tan? Yiguchen could not help but ponder. But for now, he still prioritized cultivation. Previously, when Yiguchen passed the second minor tribulation of the blood tribulation of the physical body, he only sat cross-legged near the edge of the ice-fire yin-yang tan. But now, Yiguchen hesitated slightly, and then directly jumped into the eye of the ice-fire yin-yang tan. This was almost the place where the power of ice and fire gathered the most, and it was also the spring of the entire ice-fire yin-yang tan. As soon as Yiguchen entered the eye of the tan, he instantly felt an extremely strong power of ice and fire rushing into his body in an instant, wantonly destroying his physical body like an evil dragon. Almost in an instant, Yiguchen's face flushed red, and he spat out a big mouthful of blood. The impact of such a strong power of ice and fire was still too fierce for his current cultivation of the 9th level of the Essence Origin realm. Even if he had cultivated the muscle tendon changing scripture and marrow cleansing scripture, even if he had the Vajra celestial body, and even if he had a strong recovery power, Yiguchen's physical body almost instantly burst open with a large number of bloody wounds. Streaks of blood appeared on Yiguchen's skin. At this moment, Yiguchen was like a puppet on the verge of breaking. This was because the power was too strong and too destructive. Even with Yiguchen's cold temperament, he could not bear such inhumane pain, and directly let out a painful groan. Sword vein, come out. Yiguchen gritted his teeth, and blood seeped out of his lips. In his body, 360 golden sword veins shone with golden divine light, trying to stabilize Yiguchen's body that was on the verge of breaking. However, even with the perfect sword vein, it was still unable to stop the surging power of ice and fire. The golden sword veins seemed to have dimmed under the impact of the power of ice and fire. Heaven-splitting sword soul, come out. Yiguchen roared with a hoarse voice. In his body, the 3,000 heaven-splitting sword souls appeared again, trying to resist the power of ice and fire. With the double suppression of the golden sword vein and heaven-splitting sword souls, the power of ice and fire was slightly weakened, but that was all. At this moment, Yiguchen was bathed in blood, and his skin was sometimes charred black, and sometimes covered with ice and snow. If it were any other Qi refining grandmaster, even if he was at the peak of the Qi refining realm, he would definitely die if he fell into the ice and fire yin-yang tan eye. However, Yiguchen relied on his physical body and various trump cards. Coupled with his inhuman strong will, he was able to withstand the attack. Yiguchen silently operated the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra, and with the help of the terrifying power of ice and fire, he wanted to pass through the blood tribulation of his physical body. Chapter 85. This was simply a huge torture. The pain of crossing the blood tribulation of the physical body plus the pain of being attacked by the power of ice and fire. Anyone else would find it unbearable and their will would collapse. But Yiguchen would not. He was the sword demon, the Duguubai who once dominated the world. If the Duguubai's will could not bear it, then no one could. As time passed, even the pain seemed to have become numb. Yiguchen only felt that his physical body did not belong to him. His body was broken and his body was in a mess because of the power of various attributes. If not for the muscle tendon changing scripture and marrow cleansing scripture, Yiguchen's physical body would have collapsed long ago. However, in this continuous destruction, there was also new life. Yiguchen gradually discovered that his physical body seemed to show signs of recovery under the circulation of a mysterious power. This was the power of the Nine Tribulations Heart Sutra. The Nine Tribulations Heart Sutra allowed one to pass through 9 tribulations to become a god. Each tribulation was extremely painful, but as long as one could pass through it, the benefits would be endless. Yiguchen would reach the pinnacle of this realm in every realm. This was also the reason why Yiguchen had to pass through the blood tribulation of the physical body before breaking through. He wanted to break through in the most perfect state. Yiguchen sat cross-legged like an old monk in meditation. The blood flowing all over his body had already coagulated. At this moment, his physical body had been destroyed to the extreme by the power of ice and fire, but still maintained a little vitality. At the same time, the mysterious sword of thunder tribulation that had been silent in Yiguchen's dantian began to tremble slightly. A part of the vigorous power of ice and fire was also absorbed by the sword of thunder tribulation. This state lasted for a full 5 days. On the 5th day, Yiguchen almost stopped breathing. The last bit of vitality was like a candle in the wind. Then his vitality faded away. Did I fail? Yiguchen thought in his consciousness. He was unwilling. He did not believe that there was no difficulty that could stop him from rising. Stepping over the peak, surpassing the supreme, no longer what he had hoped for in his life. He did not ask to live as long as heaven and earth, but to witness the peak of the sword Tao. How can I stop here? Within Yiguchen's dantian, the thunder calamity sword exploded with extreme lightning. Streaks of lightning power flowed along Yiguchen's almost withered body. The power of tribulation lightning was the power of destruction, but it was also the power of life. In the midst of death, nirvana contained new life. At this moment, Yiguchen suddenly opened his eyes. Rumble! Like an ancient dragon awakening, Yiguchen stood up and roared at the sky. The scabs all over his body fell off, revealing his flawless jade-like physique. Yiguchen had never had this kind of feeling before. His entire body was one with the heaven and earth, and he could operate his profound qi without any hindrance. When he casually made a move, it was very harmonious. This feeling was as if Yiguchen's body was flawless, like a perfect porcelain, completely unbreakable. Now, Yiguchen felt that it was time for a breakthrough. He took out the energy-gathering pill, which was given to him by his aunt, Xian Su, when he broke through to the qi-refining realm. Originally, with Yiguchen's current state, he could have broken through to the qi-refining realm without any obstacles without the help of the energy-gathering pill. However, after taking the energy-gathering pill, Yiguchen's cultivation realm increased even more rapidly. Finally, at a certain moment, Yiguchen's profound qi gathered in his dantian. Endless profound qi gathered at one point. Then, with a crack, as if a barrier had been broken, a wisp of genuine qi emerged and quickly spread into the sea of qi. The so-called breakthrough from the profound qi to the qi-refining realm was the process of gathering all the profound qi in the body in the dantian and building the sea of qi. Only with the sea of qi could one be considered a qi-refining realm martial artist. Moreover, the sea of qi also had differences in strength. When an ordinary martial artist broke through to the qi-refining realm, his sea of qi would be about 10 feet wide. Of course, the so-called 10 feet wide referred to the sea of qi. The bigger the sea of qi, the more genuine qi it could store. As one's realm increased, the sea of qi would also expand. As for the gods' favored ones, they would generally have a sea of qi that was at least 10 feet wide after breaking through. However, Yiguchen's sea of qi expanded to 30 feet the moment he broke through and showed no signs of stopping. First cycle of qi-refining realm. Second cycle of qi-refining realm. Third cycle of qi-refining realm. Yiguchen's cultivation realm increased like a geyser. This was not because he was lucky or because he had some halo. It was because Yiguchen had been accumulating for too long. With his strength, he could have broken through long ago. However, in order to cultivate a perfect body, he suppressed it. This was the so-called good preparation. With the help of the energy-gathering pill, Yiguchen had such a shocking breakthrough. In the end, Yiguchen's cultivation realm stopped at the 5th cycle of qi-refining realm. breaking through 5 minor levels in a row. If this news were to spread, it would definitely stun a group of so-called God's favored ones. Yiguchen's Sea of Qi had also expanded to an astonishing 100 feet wide. 100 feet of Sea of Qi. This meant that Yiguchen's true Qi far exceeded that of ordinary God's favored ones. Even if it was a group battle, as long as Yiguchen could persevere, his Sea of Qi would not dry up. Is this the increase brought about by a perfect body? Yiguchen now had an accurate understanding of the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra. It was definitely a cultivation technique that defied the natural order. After cultivating a perfect body, Yiguchen believed that the benefits were definitely not just limited to the Sea of Qi. In the future, on the road of cultivation, he would be able to cultivate to perfection in any realm and gain the upper hand. The foundation was deep, and the building was tall. Yiguchen's perfect body had undoubtedly laid the best foundation for his cultivation. His entire body, whether it was Qi, blood, true Qi, recovery ability, or toughness, had all far surpassed before. He clenched his fist and endless true Qi surged, as if it contained enough power to split the earth and overturn the sky. What made Yiguchen even happier was that his marrow cleansing sutra had naturally reached the small success stage. Yiguchen knew that this was because the marrow cleansing sutra was to cleanse the bone marrow and 5 internal organs. When he had just passed the blood tribulation, his entire body had almost been reconstructed, so the breakthrough of the marrow cleansing sutra was natural. Now that the marrow cleansing sutra has been cultivated to the small success stage, if I cultivate it to the large success stage, I will be able to cultivate the indestructible body of Vajra. Coupled with the perfect body, how strong will my body be? I'm afraid that I can resist a divine spiritual inscription weapon, right? Yiguchen's eyes were surging with excitement. His body was now able to resist an ordinary spiritual weapon barehanded. If he really cultivated the indestructible body of Vajra, coupled with the perfect body, it was not a delusion to resist a divine spiritual inscription weapon barehanded. Yiguchen was looking forward to the arrival of that moment. This was the benefit of the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra. The 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra had a total of 9 tribulations. After the blood tribulation of the body, Yiguchen naturally began to prepare for the next tribulation. The second tribulation of the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra was called the Sea of Qi Spirit Tribulation. Chapter 86. If the blood tribulation of the physical body targeted the physique to create a perfect body, then the Sea of Qi Spiritual Tribulation targeted the Sea of Qi. Like the blood tribulation of the physical body, the Sea of Qi Spiritual Tribulation also included 3 minor tribulations. After the first minor tribulation, one would cultivate a golden Sea of Qi. After the second minor tribulation, one would have a golden Sea of Qi. After the third minor tribulation, one would have a limitless Sea of Qi. Limitless Sea of Qi. Even though Yiguchen already had some understanding of the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra, he was still deeply shocked. Just the golden Sea of Qi had already amazed Yiguchen. The quality of the golden genuine Qi in the golden Sea of Qi was far superior to ordinary genuine Qi. If the same move was performed with golden genuine Qi, the power would be far superior to ordinary genuine Qi. Yiguchen estimated that if he cultivated a golden Sea of Qi, the power of all his moves would increase by at least 30%. This was already an extremely terrifying means of amplification. Moreover, there was also the limitless Sea of Qi, which meant that Yiguchen had almost endless genuine Qi. Although his Sea of Qi was already 100 feet, if he continued to release it, there would be a moment when it would dry up. However, if he cultivated a limitless Sea of Qi, then his genuine Qi would almost never dry up. Although the benefits of going through the Sea of Qi spiritual tribulation were indescribable, the conditions for going through the tribulation were not easy to achieve. To go through the first minor tribulation, one had to find a special fire of heaven and earth to light up the Sea of Qi. Using a special fire of heaven and earth to light up the Sea of Qi. If it did not come from the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra, Yiguchen would have suspected that it came from some suicidal evil technique. The importance of the Sea of Qi to a warrior was self-evident, and the first step to cultivating the golden sea of qi was to light up the sea of qi. In the eyes of an ordinary warrior, this was no different from the sea of qi. The last two tribulations were even more demanding. One had to find an extremely spiritual object or a blessed place. At the same time, in addition to the special fire of heaven and earth, one also needed a special thunder of heaven and earth to open up the sea of qi. The so-called special thunder of heaven and earth was the power of thunder of the same level as the special fire of heaven and earth. It seems that it's not that simple to go through the sea of qi spiritual tribulation. Yiguchen shook his head and sighed. If one wanted to obtain strength, they had to pay an equivalent price. Although Yiguchen had cultivated a perfect mortal body, the pain of experiencing the blood tribulation of his mortal body was not something that an ordinary person could withstand. Yiguchen slowly shook his head. Then he suddenly froze. In his dantian, in addition to his qi sea, there was also the thunder tribulation sword. At this moment, the thunder tribulation sword was still humming and trembling as it continued to absorb the power of ice and fire. Could it be? Yiguchen thought for a moment, and suddenly remembered that some vague words had appeared on the thunder tribulation sword when he was cultivating in the ice-fire yin-yang tan. It was just that the power of ice and fire absorbed at that time was not enough, so it was difficult to manifest. However, now that he had a perfect body and had broken through to the qi refinement realm, Yiguchen was no longer as fearful of the power of ice and fire as before. I'd like to see what other secrets this thunder tribulation sword has. Yiguchen's eyes lit up. Just the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra alone had benefited Yiguchen a lot. He was more and more interested in the words that appeared on the sword. Soul-devouring secret skill. Yiguchen activated the devouring power in his body and performed the soul-devouring secret skill. He was not performing it to improve his cultivation, but to increase his efforts to absorb the power of ice and fire in the ice-fire yin-yang tan. Rumble. Yiguchen's mortal body seemed to have formed a bottomless black hole. The endless heaven and earth spiritual qi, including the power of ice and fire in the ice-fire yin-yang tan, flowed into Yiguchen's body and was absorbed by the thunder tribulation sword in his dantian. Yiguchen felt that his whole body was alternating between burning and cold, but it was much better than before. Although he had felt a little pain for a long time, he was no longer as embarrassed as before. Yiguchen sat cross-legged, and the water level of the ice and fire yin-yang tan began to drop. In fact, there was no water in the entire ice and fire yin-yang tan, but it was formed by the convergence of the ice and fire yin-yang tan. Time gradually passed, and in the end, the power of ice and fire in the entire ice-fire yin-yang tan was almost completely absorbed by the thunder tribulation sword. At the bottom of the dry pool, there were countless crimson and dark blue crystals. The power of ice and fire on these crystals was also gradually absorbed. Finally, at a certain moment, the thunder tribulation sword finally stopped absorbing the power of ice and fire, and the originally vague words on the sword gradually became clear. Yiguchen closed his eyes and looked inside himself, reading all the words on the sword. Finally, Yiguchen opened his eyes, his chest rose and fell, and it was difficult to hide his shock. The mystery of the thunder tribulation sword was self-evident. Any cultivation method or scripture that appeared on it was a supreme cultivation method. What was recorded in this chapter was not a cultivation method like the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra, but a swordsmanship. The name of the swordsmanship was 10,000 God Tribulation. Like the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra, it was a supreme cultivation method that could not be classified and measured by levels. However, with Yiguchen's vision, he could see that the 10,000 God Tribulation Sword technique was not complete, and only the first move was revealed. The first move of the 10,000 God Tribulation, destruction of heaven and earth. It was a supreme swordsmanship that gathered all the vital energy in one's body at one point and suddenly exploded, destroying the void and destroying heaven and earth with one's power. Although it was not the complete 10,000 God Tribulation Sword technique, just the first move alone made Yiguchen very surprised. He could not imagine who created the 10,000 God Tribulation. Such a swordsmanship was simply a creation of heaven and earth. Even with Sword Demon Dugwubai's vision, He felt that the 10,000 God tribulation was a supreme swordsmanship. Although only the first move was revealed, it was enough for Yi Guqin. With his current strength, it was still uncertain whether he could perform this move. In the following time, Yi Guqin sat cross-legged and meditated, beginning to comprehend the 10,000 God tribulation. With Yi Guqin's talent as sword demon and the seed of the sword heart, it took him a full 7 days to comprehend it before he made some progress. At a certain moment, Yi Guqin suddenly opened his eyes, and vital energy gathered all over his body. The surrounding void seemed to be gathering momentum. He suddenly pulled out the Calamity Dust Sword, holding it vertically in front of his chest with both hands. With a roar, the vigorous vital energy in his body suddenly surged out in an overwhelming manner. It went along Yi Guqin's back and suddenly exploded, then condensed into a pair of sword wings. If one looked closely, they would realize that the sword wings, which were 20 feet wide, were condensed from pure sword energy. Just the first move of the 10,000 God tribulation could already form sword energy. Yi Guqin raised the Calamity Dust Sword high, and the sword wings on his back flapped, and endless sword energy soared into the sky. Yi Guqin tried his best to concentrate all the power of the sword wings on the tip of the Calamity Dust Sword. But even with Yi Guqin's perfect body, it was difficult for him to withstand this mighty force, and the surface of his skin began to crack open. In an instant, the vital energy in Yi Guqin's body suddenly went berserk, and Yi Guqin spat out a smear of vermilion red, and the Calamity Dust Sword quickly slashed down. Boom! The sword wings exploded with endless sword energy, and an unparalleled and domineering sword energy suddenly burst out from the bottom of the ice and fire Yin Yang Tan. There was an ear-piercing shriek in the void, and then the earth and mountains shook. Rocks flew through the air, and the endless sword energy caused the entire ice and fire cliff to collapse. Yi Guqin was hit by the force of the shock and fell directly. There was actually another mystery at the bottom of the ice and fire Yin Yang Tan. Chapter 87. Yi Guqin slowly opened his eyes. What he saw was a grotesque and variegated light. Crimson and dark blue crystals dotted the underground karst cave. He moved his body. Even with the strength of his perfect body, it was difficult to withstand the pressure of the 10,000 God tribulation. This was what it meant to kill 1,000 enemies and lose 800 of your own men. It is indeed a supreme sword technique. Yi Guqin smiled bitterly. He had not released the complete first move of the 10,000 God tribulation just now. Condensing the sword wings was just the basics. The most important thing was to condense the infinite sword chi into one point. But with Yi Guqin's current cultivation, he could not fully display this sword technique. At the same time, Yi Guqin was shocked to find that nearly 90% of the genuine chi in his body had been drained in an instant. Logically speaking, with Yi Guqin's horrifying ocean of chi, there was almost no sign of it drying up. However, he had only displayed an incomplete version of the 10,000 deities tribulation, and his ocean of chi had almost dried up. It seems that in the future, unless it is a matter of life and death, I can't use the 10,000 God tribulation. Otherwise, after one move, if I can't kill the enemy, I can only be at the mercy of others. Yi Guqin secretly shook his head. He even suspected that the 10,000 God tribulation was a sword technique that matched the 9 tribulations Heart Sutra. Perhaps only the 100,000 feet sea of chi could support the consumption of the 10,000 God tribulation's genuine chi. Yi Guqin thought to himself. Even with the recovery ability of his perfect fleshly body, it still took him a full day to recover. Only then did the wounds on his body gradually heal. His true energy also gradually recovered. At this time, Yi Guqin began to look around the underground karst cave. The appearance of the ice and fire Yin Yang Tan was not accidental. Yi Guqin had suspected it before, but now, he felt that there seemed to be a faint and powerful pressure spreading from the depths of the karst cave. That pressure was not only the pressure of the breath, but also the pressure of the soul. What is in there? Yi Guqin frowned, faintly feeling that he seemed to have found something extraordinary. He gradually swept into the depths of the underground karst cave. The deeper he went, the stronger the power of ice and fire around him. If not for the fact that Yiguchin had already gotten used to the power of ice and fire when he broke through to the perfect body stage, it would have been very difficult for him to enter. The deeper they went, the more Yiguchin discovered that the number of crystals in the surroundings increased. The crimson crystals and the dark blue crystals complemented each other, decorating the underground cave with a myriad of colors. Suddenly, Yiguchin stopped and looked around. There were several dark and deep tunnels in the underground cave. He was in the main cave. Yiguchin sensed a dangerous aura. However, when he looked in front of him, he found that there were flames in front of him. The crimson flames were mixed with dark blue flames, like a waterfall of fire. It was very mysterious and strange. Inside the waterfall of fire, many crimson crystals and dark blue crystals were piled up together. In the center, a cluster of flames was slowly rising. That flame was extremely strange. Its outer flame was crimson red, but its core was a deep blue flame. Yiguchin was stunned for a moment as he felt the extreme temperature coming from the cluster of flames. Soon after, his eyes lit up. That's the rare fire of heaven and earth. It was really a case of searching high and low for something, only to find it by chance. If he wanted to forge a soft sword, the last thing he lacked was the rare fire of heaven and earth. Now it was placed in front of him. Although this rare fire of heaven and earth exuded a blazing power, at the same time, there was also an extremely cold power spreading out. Cold and hot, ice and fire. The two completely opposite forces were perfectly combined by this rare fire of heaven and earth. Although he did not know the name of this rare fire of heaven and earth, it was definitely extraordinary. Sure enough, the formation of the ice and fire yin-yang tan is not accidental. It turns out that it is related to this rare fire of heaven and earth. Yiguchin's eyes were clear as he was about to collect the fire. Suddenly, a cold breath, like frost and flying snow, gushed toward Yiguchin. Feeling the bone-chilling coldness behind him, Yiguchin moved and used the willow kaken wind body technique to dodge the breath. He looked back and was instantly stunned. He saw a lizard-like monstrous beast scurrying out from another karst cave. This lizard-like monstrous beast was 30 feet long. Its limbs were thick and its pitch-black claws were as sharp as hooks. It had two heads, one dark blue and the other crimson red. It was covered from head to toe with a crystal armor like ice and fire. Feeling the pressure from this lizard-like monstrous beast, Yiguchin could not help but be secretly shocked. Fourth-rank monstrous beast? A third-rank monstrous beast was already difficult for an ordinary warrior in the chi refining realm to contend with. As for a fourth-rank monstrous beast, it almost had the power to contend with a human divine soul realm warrior. A monstrous beast of this level was not in existence that a warrior in the chi refining realm could contend with. However, Yiguchin was not an ordinary warrior in the chi refining realm. He had many trump cards. When he was in the essence realm, he could already contend with a god's favored son in the chi refining realm. Now that he had broken through to the chi refining realm not long ago, Yiguchin wanted to test the extent of his strength. And this fourth-rank monstrous beast, the ice and fire dragon lizard, was the best test of his strength. Yiguchin did not have the slightest fear. Instead, his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. As if it felt the provocation of the human in front of it, the two heads of the ice and fire dragon lizard roared. Its body moved and attacked Yiguchin. Yiguchin flipped his hand and unsheathed the calamity dust sword. The vigorous true chi of the fifth revolution of the chi refining realm was poured into the sword. The entire calamity dust sword instantly burst out with a dazzling sword light. 42 vessel meridians were all lit up, increasing the power of the sword light. Feeling the powerful true chi that he had mastered, Yiguchin also gained confidence. True chi was more powerful than essence chi. Kill. Yiguchin struck out with his sword. On the calamity dust sword, the broken edge spirit inscription shone brightly. An extremely sharp armor-piercing power was emitted from the tip of the sword. Aurora quick sword, Aurora's passing. A streak of sword light, with a penetrating power, fiercely hit the head of the ice and fire dragon lizard. However, upon contact, Yiguchin felt as if the tip of the sword had stabbed into an iron wall. It only pierced an inch. Compared to the huge head of the ice and fire dragon lizard, This inch was probably not enough to break its crystal armor. As expected of a fourth-rank monstrous beast, Yiguchen sighed inwardly. The other head of the ice and fire dragon lizard opened its mouth and spat out a breath of ice. Yiguchen used the willow kaken wind movement technique to dodge. The ice and fire dragon lizard raised its pitch-black claws and attacked. Yiguchen blocked with his sword. In an instant, a huge force came. Yiguchen's body directly smashed into the side of the karst cave like a cannonball, creating a human-shaped pit. Crystal shards flew everywhere. What a powerful force! Yiguchen's chest heaved up and down, calming the turbulent chi and blood in his body. Fortunately, he had a perfect body and could recover quickly. However, the ice and fire dragon lizard would not give him much time. Its two ferocious heads opened their mouths. A breath of ice and a breath of fire swept out at the same time. They intertwined in the air, forming a spectacular breath of ice and fire. Seeing the ice and fire dragon lizard's attack coming, Yiguchen formed a seal with one hand. Luo Tian Protection. Chapter 88. As his voice fell, Yiguchen's powerful genuine chi burst out and condensed around him like clouds and mist. Immediately, it turned into a guardian Vajra's shadow. It was different from the cloud-like shadow that Yiguchen had displayed before. The guardian Vajra's shadow this time was still somewhat illusory, but it was much more solid and translucent than before. This was a spiritual stage defensive martial art. Even if Yiguchen had broken through to the fifth turn of Chi refinement realm, he could not fully display the defensive power of the protection of highest heaven. Even so, the current protection of highest heaven's defensive power was much stronger than before. Boom! The breath of ice and fire fell on the guardian Vajra's shadow. Yiguchen's body shook and he was pushed back again. Kill. Taking advantage of this moment, Yiguchen held the calamity dust and displayed his unique sword skill. He knew that with the strength of a rank 4 monster, ordinary sword moves were useless against it. Shadow-killing swordsmanship, vanishing shadow in an instant. Yiguchen's sword momentum gathered and his body suddenly flashed out, leaving behind an afterimage. He slashed out with his sword. The sword edge shook the void and made a buzzing sound. Clang. The sword hit the fire head, but the ice head on the other side opened its huge mouth. Its crisscrossing fangs were like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. As long as one was bitten, one's body would be torn apart. Yiguchen's eyes were clear. He flipped his other hand and the blood-red flying guillotine flashed out. Vacuum sword wave, stacking waves. Yiguchen held the flying guillotine in his other hand and displayed the vacuum sword wave's unique skill at the same time. Almost in an instant, 20 layers of transparent sword waves spread out, resonating with the vibration of the void. The vibration power ignored the defense and instantly penetrated the ice-fire dragon lizard's crystal armor and hurt its internal organs. Unlike Yiguchen, the ice-fire dragon lizard did not cultivate the marrow cleansing sutra, which allowed it to cultivate its internal organs. Although its outer crystal armor was extremely hard, its internal organs were soft and fragile. This vacuum sword wave is indeed useful. Previously, some people in the Beichen mansion discussed that this sword technique originated from the Limitless Sword sect's spirit tier sword technique, the Void Sword technique. If I have the chance, I must obtain this spirit tier sword technique, Yiguchen thought to himself as he repelled the ice-fire dragon lizard with a single strike. The dragon lizard of ice and fire was a little dizzy from the injury, and some blood flowed out of its mouth. However, the physique of a rank 4 monster beast was not something that could be killed by a vacuum sword wave. If one sword isn't enough, then two. Yiguchen held the flying guillotine in his left hand and the calamity dust in his right. He wielded two swords at the same time. Once again, he displayed his ultimate swordsmanship, dual sword divergence. The calamity dust in his left hand vibrated, and the tip of the sword drew a full moon. Behind him, sword chi soared into the sky, turning into a dark ocean. A bright moon of sword chi rose. With the flying guillotine in his right hand, he once again displayed the vacuum sword wave's ultimate move, overlapping waves. In an instant, the void vibrated and the sword wave overlapped. The two swords were displayed at the same time, and their power shook the heavens. The entire underground cave rumbled. If it were not for the many crystals embedded in the rock to reinforce the cave, the entire cave would have collapsed. The ice-fire dragon lizard instinctively sensed a trace of danger. Its crystal armor burst into light, and its defense was clearly at its limit. Then, it opened its mouth and spat out a breath of ice and fire. Rumble! Sword chi overflowed, and the power of ice and fire surged. Yiguchin used the sea-rising bright moon to manifest a bright moon of sword chi, breaking the ice-fire dragon lizard's breath of ice and fire. The flying guillotine carried 20 layers of sword wave and bombarded the ice-fire dragon lizard's head. An extremely trembling roar came out. The ice-fire dragon lizard's head roared wildly, and blood spurted out of its 7 orifices. This strike had actually shattered the insides of the raging flame skull, causing the skull and brain matter to mix together like tofu. After letting out a roar, the ice-fire dragon lizard's head fell directly to the ground. But then, the other ice head collided with it. Its pair of beast eyes were blood red, and it was obviously enraged. Boom! The head covered in thick crystal armor heavily bombarded Yiguchin. The sword chi around him had long been worn out by the ice-fire dragon lizard's breath of ice and fire. Yiguchin's body crashed to the ground, and gravel flew everywhere. He spat out a mouthful of red blood, and it was obvious that he had suffered serious injuries. The ice-fire dragon lizard, which only had 1 ice head left, had entered the berserk stage. The power of ice and fire surged all over its body, and its sharp claws pressed down on Yiguchin like hooks. Yiguchin blocked with his 2 swords. He felt like he was being crushed by a primordial fierce beast, and the bones in his body cracked. He was sure that if he didn't have the perfect body and the Vajradharma body, he would have been crushed into a bloody pulp. Soul-devouring secret skill. Yiguchin activated a wisp of devouring power in his body. Suddenly, the surrounding spiritual chi, as well as the power of ice and fire, rushed into his body crazily. Yiguchin's strength almost exploded in an instant. 6th cycle of chi refining. 7th cycle of chi refining. 8th cycle of chi refining. It was not until Yiguchin reached the 9th cycle of chi refining that his aura calmed down slightly. The divine soul realm was a threshold. Even with the power of the soul-devouring secret skill, Yiguchin could not break through the barrier of the divine soul realm at the 5th cycle of chi refining. But even so, it was enough. Feeling that his body was filled with genuine chi almost instantly, Yiguchin's eyes were as dazzling as the sword light. Sky-splitting sword soul, come out. The cyan sword soul surged out of Yiguchin's body like a dragon returning to the sea. Its impact shook the dragon lizard of ice and fire away. Yiguchin put away the flying guillotine with 1 hand, and then pointed between his eyebrows to control his genuine chi and the sky-splitting sword soul. With the help of the soul-devouring secret skill, Yiguchin's cultivation had reached the 9th cycle of chi refining. At this level, he could barely control 3,000 sword souls. If he wanted to control them perfectly, he had to break through the divine soul realm. Kill. Yiguchin pointed between his eyebrows. The 3,000 sky-splitting sword souls seemed to have their own consciousness. They followed Yiguchin's finger and attacked the dragon lizard of ice and fire. It was conceivable that 3,000 sword souls would cover the sky and earth, like a giant sword chi dragon, cutting the air. Even the dragon lizard of ice and fire, who had gone mad, could not help but show a trace of fear in its eyes when it saw the sword pressure. Then, it turned around and tried to escape. Rumble! However, the dragon lizard of ice and fire was still not as fast as the sky-splitting sword souls. The 3,000 sword souls bombarded the dragon lizard of ice and fire. Although the crystal armor on the surface of the dragon lizard of ice and fire was strong, under the repeated attacks of the 3,000 sword souls, it could not withstand the bombardment and suddenly broke into pieces. The sky-splitting sword souls entered the dragon lizard of ice and fire through the broken wounds. They were like sharp blades, crisscrossing each other. The bones, muscles, and internal organs were all severely injured under the impact of the cyan sword souls. Looking at the dragon lizard of ice and fire, which was howling in pain, Yiguchin could not help but shake his head and sigh. The unique skill of the sword sect of the 8th generation sword master, Itianxing, was so terrifying. The 3,000 sky-splitting sword souls alone were enough to severely injure the rank 4 demonic beast to the brink of death, as if its body was being dismembered. If one day, Yiguchen could absorb all the 108,000 sword souls, the power would be enough to wipe out an aristocratic family or sect with a flip of his hand. Yiguchen's heart was filled with yearning as he imagined that he would be able to do whatever he wanted. I'll end you with one move. Chapter 89. As soon as Yiguchen finished speaking, he raised the Jiechen sword and activated the Broken Edge spiritual tattoo and the Thunderstorm spiritual tattoo at the same time. In an instant, the sharp light on the Jiechen sword flickered with extremely destructive dazzling lightning. The unique skill of the Boundless Heaven Sword art, Boundless Wheel. The crisscrossing sword edges were like the trajectory of the heavens. Then, they overlapped and turned into the Boundless Wheel, which flashed with lightning and blasted toward the ice head of the dragon lizard of ice and fire. Boom! Lightning splashed and ice crystal fragments flew everywhere. The dragon lizard of ice and fire let out a roar that shook the sky. However, the roar was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Finally, the movement of the dragon lizard of ice and fire became slower and slower. Then, the ice head fell to the ground powerlessly. A deep cut directly broke its crystal armor, and even the brain was vaguely visible. The Boundless Heaven Sword art was a superb spiritual level sword art, so the power of its unique skill should not be underestimated. In addition, Yiguchen had performed the soul-devouring secret skill and the Jiechen sword spiritual tattoo, so that he could kill the dragon lizard of ice and fire. It was not until the dragon lizard of ice and fire fell to the ground that Yiguchen relaxed. He withdrew the soul-devouring secret skill, and his aura fell back to the 5th turn of the Qi refining realm. At the same time, Yiguchen felt weak and collapsed to the ground. Although the soul-devouring secret skill was a trump card, its side effects were also very obvious. This was because Yiguchen had a Qi C of 100 feet. If it were an ordinary Qi C of 100 feet, he would have fainted directly after performing the soul-devouring secret skill. This made Yiguchen shake his head with a wry smile. Although the side effects of the soul-devouring secret skill were not as terrible as the 10,000 deities tribulation, he could not use it casually. But no matter what, Yiguchen looked at the huge body of the dragon lizard of ice and fire on the ground and sighed in his heart. Once upon a time, when he was fighting for the dragon blood transforming fruit, a rank 3 golden-eyed horned dragon python made him feel suffocated. But now, he could even kill a rank 4 demonic beast. It had to be said that this kind of increase in strength was indeed an indescribable pleasure. Yiguchen was certain that even among the heaven's favorites, there were only a few who could fight against a 4th-rank demonic beast. As for those who could kill it like him, it could be said that they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. However, Yiguchen was not complacent. Although he was improving, the others might not necessarily be stagnant. For example, his nemesis Xia Yubing, who had obtained the North River Sword King's inheritance, her cultivation speed was definitely not slower than his. Adding on the fact that she possessed a rare sword intent, she was definitely his #1 opponent in the 10 Prefectures elite gathering. The others couldn't be underestimated either. For example, Murong Ditian. That sword of his had never been unsealed, yet it gave Yiguchen an extremely dangerous feeling. For example, Prince Yuani had an upper-grade spiritual weapon and the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel. He was definitely a strong opponent. Looks like I have to hurry up. After obtaining this heaven and earth unique flame, I will have the capital to forge a flexible sword and comprehend the hard-soft sword intent. If I can also obtain the Azura sword intent, with the addition of 2 sword intents, I won't fear anyone. Yiguchen's eyes were clear and filled with confidence. With a perfect physical body and a 300-meter Qi C, Yiguchen's injuries recovered by more than half in half a day. He looked at the corpse of the ice-fire dragon lizard. The entire body of a 4th-rank demonic beast was filled with treasures. Although Yiguchen had plundered 50,000 crystal jades from the Situ family's treasury, no one would complain about having too many crystal jades. Yiguchen's origin ring couldn't store living things, but it was still able to store dead things. The entire corpse of the ice fire dragon lizard was stored into Yi Guchen's origin ring. Yi Guchen suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He thought of the powerful defensive power of the crystal armor on the surface of the ice fire dragon lizard's body. If the crystal armor was refined into an armor, its defensive power would definitely be extraordinary. However, this was just an idea. The difficulty of refining an armor-type spirit tool was far greater than other spirit tools. It was because of this that defensive spirit tools were so rare. However, Yi Guchen thought that with the old drunkard's forging skills, refining an armor-type spirit tool should be a piece of cake. Putting this thought to the bottom of his heart, Yi Guchen walked to the side of the heaven and earth unique flame. If it were an ordinary person, they definitely wouldn't be able to get within 10 meters of it. However, Yi Guchen was different. His perfect physical body originally relied on the power of ice and fire to break through, so to a certain extent, he was already partially immune to the temperature of the flame. Looking at this dual-colored flame, Yi Guchen couldn't help but shake his head. It was indeed a heaven and earth unique item. Every heaven and earth unique flame had a different attribute. For example, this heaven and earth unique flame was the coexistence of extreme heat and extreme cold. It was very strange. Let's take it back first. Yi Guchen didn't plan to refine it directly. He didn't know much about refining fire seeds and forging. It was best to ask the old drunkard before making a decision. Yi Guchen collected a lot of ice and fire crystals. These ice and fire crystals were all derived from heaven and earth unique flames, so they didn't melt or repel. Using many ice and fire crystals to wrap the heaven and earth flame, it was like a piece of amber, sealing the flame inside. After putting the heaven and earth unique flame into his origin ring, Yi Guchen also looked for a way out. Although the ice and fire cliff had collapsed, there were other caves in this underground karst cave. The dragon lizard of ice and fire had obviously come in from another cave. Soon, Yi Guchen found a way out and returned to the outside of the cliff. He looked back and saw that the ice and fire chi rising from the ice and fire cliff had become a rift valley with layers of broken stones. There was nothing special about it anymore. Next, I'll return to the Milky Way Prefecture's Merchant River City and find the old drunkard to discuss the sword forging method. Yi Guchen's figure instantly floated away. This time, Yi Guchen's strength had increased greatly. If he could obtain the flexible sword and comprehend two sword intents, then Yi Guchen was confident that he wouldn't fear any prodigy in the 10 prefectures' elite gathering. Merchant River City, as the bustling place of the Milky Way Prefecture, was just like before. People came and went, and there was an endless stream of horses and carriages. Yi Guchen returned to Merchant River City, and naturally went to find the old drunkard. However, along the way, he heard some interesting rumors. TSKE, the battle for the head of the prodigies 2 days ago was really too exciting. I really didn't know that Xia Yubing was actually so strong. Some cultivators were discussing. Yeah, it really opened my eyes. Xia Yubing actually fought 1 against 5, and even defeated them. Song Daojin, Bei Denge, Wang Qin, Zhou Han, and Chu Shiqing are all part of the 7 prodigies, but they were all defeated by Xia Yubing. Her strength is just too terrifying. Now, Xia Yubing can be considered as the #1 prodigy in the Milky Way Prefecture. I'm afraid that even the previous generation's #1 prodigy, Yi Guchen, didn't have such a battle record, right? No, I heard that Yi Guchen made a name for himself in the Beichen Prefecture, defeating 5 prodigies together. This Xia Yubing? Yi Guchen sat in a tea house, frowning slightly as he listened to the cultivators beside him talk. These 5 prodigies obviously didn't have much weight in Yi Guchen's eyes now. However, if the 5 of them were to fight together and use their trump cards, even Yi Guchen couldn't guarantee that he would be able to defeat them all. However, Xia Yubing had done it. Putting aside whether or not the 5 prodigies were holding back, there was no need to doubt Xia Yubing's strength. Moreover, Yi Guchen was sure that Xia Yubing wouldn't reveal all her trump cards before facing him. Chapter 90. Looks like the inheritance of the North River Sword King really can't be underestimated. After all, he's an expert that crossed the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth, Yi Guchen thought to himself as he sipped his tea. After meeting Ancestor Situ and the demon judge, Yiguchen had a preliminary understanding of the experts at the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth. The North River Sword King was an expert that crossed the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth. His strength was unquestionable, and the inheritance he left behind was definitely not simple. Only by relying on that inheritance could Xia Yubing's strength improve so much. Originally, Yiguchen thought that Xia Yubing was just a little troublesome, but now it seemed that he had underestimated this black-bellied and ice-cold childhood sweetheart. However, Yiguchen didn't plan to fight for the title of number 1 Heaven's Pride in the Sky River province, nor would he fight with Xia Yubing now. Xia Yubing wasn't his only enemy. Waiter, the bill. Yiguchen stood up and smiled. Only strength could prove everything. The title of number 1 Heaven's Pride was nothing but empty words. Yiguchen walked through all the taverns in Merchant River City, and finally found the old drunkard huddled in the corner of a small tavern. The old drunkard's addiction to alcohol was acting up again, but he had no money to drink. His old face was wrinkled like a chrysanthemum. Seeing Yiguchen, the old drunkard's turbid eyes suddenly lit up. Without saying anything, he pulled Yiguchen's sleeve and ran into the tavern. In the side room of the tavern, cups of wine were scattered all over the place, and the room was filled with the strong smell of alcohol. The old drunkard burped, and his old face was as red as an apple, revealing a satisfied expression. Seeing this, Yiguchen didn't hesitate and took out the mysterious silver heavy water, spirit seal, and heavenly flame. The old drunkard glanced over, revealing a slightly surprised expression. "Senior, I've gathered all the materials to forge the flexible sword," Yiguchen said. "What a lucky kid. You managed to find everything." The old drunkard clicked his tongue and looked around. "Well, these 5 spiritual tattoos are the Phantom Spiritual Tattoo, Lightness Spiritual Tattoo, Chi-Gathering Spiritual Tattoo, Sturdy Spiritual Tattoo, and Self-Healing Spiritual Tattoo. Although they are not very advanced spiritual tattoos, they are just passable," old drunkard commented. Yiguchen's eyes twitched when he saw that the spiritual runes collected by a super aristocratic family were barely enough in the eyes of the old drunkard. "This is?" Old drunkard was surprised when he saw the heavenly fire sealed in the ice fire crystal. "Senior, may I know what kind of heaven and earth rare flame this is?" Yiguchen was also curious about the origin of this heaven and earth rare flame. "Heavenly sun dark fire." "Good lad." Even among the rare flames in the world, this kind of fire seed can be considered top-notch. You actually managed to find such a fire seed. Old drunkard was speechless. Heavenly sun dark fire? Yiguchen was confused. This heavenly sun dark fire not only contains the power of extreme yang, but also the power of extreme cold. It alternates between yin and yang, and the transformation of cold and heat. Not only is it very suitable for forging weapons, but it is also a major killing move against enemies. Old drunkard stared at Yiguchen, obviously wondering how Yiguchen could have such good luck. Yiguchen's eyes flashed when he heard this. "I can give this fire to you, senior. I hope you can help me forge a flexible sword." Old drunkard was not surprised at Yiguchen's words, but his expression did not change at all. He said, "I have already said that I have no intention of helping you forge a flexible sword." Yiguchen sighed slightly. He knew that it was too naive to bribe old drunkard to forge a flexible sword with just a few bottles of wine. "Then senior can continue to drink here. I will find another way." Yiguchen cupped his hands and was about to leave. Old drunkard said slowly. Yiguchen stopped in his tracks and looked at old drunkard. "Although I don't want to forge a flexible sword, haven't you thought of forging a flexible sword yourself?" Old drunkard asked. Yiguchen's eyes lit up. He also wanted to forge a flexible sword that belonged to him, but he could not find a way. Although he had interacted with Chu Shiqing before, it was only a superficial understanding. "I want to forge a flexible sword that belongs to me, but I also know that my ability is limited. A spiritual inscription divine weapon is not something that I can forge right now." Yiguchen knew himself well. He might be able to forge an ordinary spiritual weapon after learning a bit. However, not everyone could forge a spiritual inscription divine weapon. At the very least, one had to be a 4-star forging master to forge it. He had never come into contact with forging, so how could he forge a spiritual inscription divine weapon? Old Drunkard laughed when he heard Yi Guchen's words. Little Yi, do you know the immemorial famous sword records? Of course, Yi Guchen said sternly. Let's not talk about the heaven ranking of the immemorial famous sword records for now. The famous swords on the earth ranking are all forged by humans. Although some of the famous swords were forged by divine craftsmen, most of the famous swords were the swords of the ancient sword emperors. They did not specialize in forging, but they could still nurture the famous swords of the ancient sword emperors, Old Drunkard said meaningfully. Senior, you mean? Yi Guchen suddenly understood. That's right. For a sword cultivator, forging other weapons might not be advantageous at all. However, when it comes to forging swords, some sword cultivators are even more suitable than forging masters. This is because they are the sword users and have a better chance of nurturing a peerless famous sword. Old Drunkard's words enlightened Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen's mind suddenly became clear. It doesn't matter if you can't forge a spiritual inscription divine weapon for now. You can forge the sword embryo of a flexible sword. As for the spiritual inscriptions, I can help you inscribe them, Old Drunkard said. Yi Guchen already knew that Old Drunkard had the intention of teaching him the art of forging. I will never forget Senior's kindness in teaching me the art of forging. Yi Guchen sincerely cupped his hands at Old Drunkard. In fact, he had long intended to forge a famous sword that belonged to him. This was because only a famous sword that he forged himself would be most compatible with him. Yi Guchen even had ambitions. Since the famous swords nurtured by the ancient sword emperors could enter the earth ranking of the immemorial famous sword records, then in the future, when his cultivation reached the peak step by step, why couldn't he nurture a famous sword that belonged to him? At the thought of this, Yi Guchen felt a sense of pride in his heart. If the famous sword that he forged and nurtured entered the immemorial famous sword records, how bold would that be? Not only did Yi Guchen himself want to reach the peak of the sword Dao, but his sword also wanted to reach the peak of the famous sword. Of course, this was just a thought. If Yi Guchen were to say such words now, it would undoubtedly be a joke. Yi Guchen hid this thought deep in his heart. He believed that there would be a day when this would not be a dream. All right, you brat. 3 days later, outside Shanghai City, we will meet at Tongtian Mountain. Old Drunkard waved his hand and continued drinking. Yi Guchen nodded and left. He wanted to go outside Shanghai City to cultivate in the bamboo forest and wait for 3 days before heading to Tongtian Mountain. But when Yi Guchen was about to reach the gates of Shanghai City, a figure with his back facing him blocked his path. Looking at the slender figure in black, Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows. Song Daozhen? Chapter 91. Song Daozhen was a prodigy of the Song clan, one of the 5 great families of the Milky Way prefecture. When Yi Guchen was still the leader of the 7 prodigies of the Milky Way prefecture, Song Daozhen had always been ranked second. Later, when Yi Guchen's prodigy Halo fell and Xia Yubing followed closely behind, Song Daozhen still couldn't beat her and was ranked second. Therefore, some busybodies in the Milky Way prefecture called Song Daozhen the Eternal Second. This wasn't because Song Daozhen wasn't strong, but because Yi Guchen and Xia Yubing were too strong. Yi Guchen, you've actually returned. The slender figure turned around, revealing a handsome face with a faint scholarly aura. It was Song Daozhen. Yi Guchen nodded slightly. His impression of Song Daozhen was quite good. At least after the incident in the Sword King Mystic Realm, Bei Denge and the others had used unscrupulous means against him. However, Song Daozhen did not become resentful because he was ranked second for many years and did not do anything to hit Yi Guchen when he was down. Among the 7 prodigies of the Milky Way prefecture, apart from Chu Shiqing, Song Daozhen was probably the only one who had a good relationship with him. Since you're here, you should have heard about how the 5 of us were defeated by Xia Yubing. Song Daozhen couldn't help but smile wryly at this point. Have you really done your best? Yi Guchen's eyes were filled with confusion. Song Daozhen shook his head and said, although the 5 of us didn't use our trump cards, Xia Yubing didn't use her full strength. The North River Sword King's inheritance isn't that simple. Yi Guchen nodded slightly. In fact, he sympathized with Song Daozhen. Song Daozhen wasn't weak among the 7 prodigies of the Milky Way prefecture. At least, he was stronger than Bei Denge. Unfortunately, Xia Yubing had obtained the Sword King's inheritance. Even he had to be careful, let alone Song Daojin. So, what business do you have here? Yi Guchen asked. Fight with me. Song Daojin's origin ring flashed and the azure edge sword was unsheathed. At the same time, a chi comparable to the 7th transformation chi refinement realm spread out. Looks like during this period of time, Song Daojin hasn't been standing still. As soon as this aura spread out, it immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding people. In addition, their position was at the edge of the Shang River city's gate. People were coming and going, which naturally attracted a lot of attention. Isn't that Song Daojin? He's actually using his sword against someone. Who is that? That's the sword sexy Guchen. He actually returned to the Milky Way prefecture? I've heard that this Yi Guchen caused quite a commotion in the Beichen manor. Looks like he has been reborn from the ashes. That may not be the case. It depends on whether or not he can contend against Song Daojin. After all, seeing is believing. Soon, a group of people gathered around. There were peddlers and many martial artists. The soldiers guarding the city gates were also unable to stop them. After all, one of them was a genius from one of the 5 great clans, the Song clan. Seeing more and more people gather around, Yi Guchen's eyes flickered. He looked at Song Daojin and said, "Did Xia Yubing send you to fight me? Am I that kind of person in Brother Ye's eyes? I admit that I'm not as strong as Xia Yubing, but so what? I can't defeat her now, but that doesn't mean I won't be able to defeat her in the future." Song Daojin tightened his grip on the azure edge sword. "My apologies, it was a slip of the tongue. Since you want to fight, then come." Yi Guchen unsheathed his calamity dust sword and the aura of the 5th transformation chi refinement realm spread out. Yeah, the 5th transformation chi refinement realm. Let alone Xia Yubing, even Song Daojin's cultivation is higher than his, a martial artist said disdainfully. Xia Yubing is already at the 8th transformation chi refinement realm. She's one of the best in the 10 prefectures. This rumor about Yi Guchen in the Beichen prefecture, I'm afraid it's not true. When Yi Guchen's aura spread out, it attracted a wave of questioning and discussion. After all, in terms of cultivation, Yi Guchen was still a bit lacking. However, Song Daojin did not underestimate him in the slightest. The azure edge sword in his hand vibrated endlessly. "Brother Song, use your strongest sword move." Yi Guchen smiled calmly. He did not want to waste too much time here, and at the same time, he did not want to reveal too many of his techniques. Song Daojin thought so as well. He naturally couldn't reveal his greatest trump card, but he could still reveal his strongest move, which was second only to his trump card. Clear Wind Sword Art, Death of Wind. Song Daojin swung his sword. His sword chi stirred up a true gale. The powerful sword chi condensed into a line in an instant. A flash of azure light was as fast as the wind, tearing through the air and whistling towards Yi Guchen. It's the Song family's Xiantian sword art, and it's been cultivated to the realm of great accomplishment. Some warriors exclaimed in shock, their eyes filled with disbelief. It was extremely difficult to cultivate a Xiantian sword art to the realm of great accomplishment. Those who could do this were the true prodigies of the sword principle. Even Yi Guchen couldn't help but exclaim in admiration when he saw the sword. As expected of the prodigy who firmly occupied the second place, this sword art was already amazing. However, it was still not enough. A true prodigy of the sword principle would at least be able to comprehend a spirit-level sword art to the realm of small accomplishment. Although Song Daojin also had a spirit-level sword art, he did not use it. Yi Guchen held the calamity dust, the sword edge vibrating. The scattered sword chi rippled in the void, as if forming an illusory sea. Above the sea, a bright moon quietly rose. The ultimate move of the piercing moon sword art, bright moon rising from the sea. It's the manifestation of sword chi. Among the crowd, there was no lack of sword cultivators who practiced the sword. When they saw the bright moon of sword chi, they screamed in horror. This was the realm of the sword principle that sword cultivators dreamed of. Boom! The two moves intersected, and a violent wave of air surged and spread. The surrounding crowd was knocked back, and some even fell to the ground and vomited blood. After the smoke and dust dispersed, Yiguchin held the calamity dust in his hand. His eyes were clear, and there was not a speck of dust on him. On the other hand, although Song Daojin was not too embarrassed, he was knocked back. Blood dripped from the fingers of the hand that held the emerald-edged sword. Yiguchin, you've really risen again. I didn't expect that I still can't beat you. Song Daojin smiled with a touch of self-mockery in his eyes. He put away the emerald-edged sword, retracted his injured hand into his sleeve, and turned to leave. Brother Song, I have something to say to you. Seeing Song Daojin's lonely back, Yiguchin suddenly spoke. Song Daojin stopped in his tracks. Don't forget your sword heart. That's all I have to say. Goodbye. Yiguchin saluted and turned to walk toward the city gate. But before he left, he glanced at the shop on the second floor. Two figures quickly flashed by. Don't forget your sword heart. Let go. Song Daojin's eyes suddenly lit up, as if he had understood something. On the second floor, two figures looked serious. They were the disciples of the Xia family and the Bei family. I didn't expect that Yiguchin could defeat Song Daojin with one strike. Although his cultivation is not high, his strength is not weak. Damn it. If he didn't have a powerful aunt, our two families would have gotten rid of this kid. What can we do? If our two families take action and his aunt finds out, it will be a disaster for our families. Obviously, Xuansu's killing of the Bei family's divine soul realm elder with one finger had become a nightmare for the two families. Although we can't take action, we can kill him with a borrowed knife. You mean, bloodthirsty tower? Chapter 92. Yiguchen's lips curled into a faint smile as he walked out of Shang River City. He knew that his battle with Song Daojin had been witnessed by someone. If he was not mistaken, it should be the spies of the Xia and Bei clans. However, Yiguchen did not care. They did not attack directly, which proved that they were still afraid of Xuansu. Yiguchen was still on guard. Although the two clans might not attack openly, it was hard to say what they would do in secret. However, with Yiguchen's current cultivation, he was not someone who would be bullied easily. If the two clans forced him, Yiguchen would not mind paying the price to deal with them. He shook his head and temporarily put aside the matter of the two clans. Right now, he should focus on forging the soft sword in 3 days. Tongtian Mountain was located a few hundred miles outside of Shang River City. Although the name was domineering, it was just a few barren mountains. Normally, there were few people and no traces of demon beasts. It was truly a place where birds could not fly and people could not be found. 3 days later, Yiguchen arrived at Tongtian Mountain. Not long after, he met the old drunkard. Little Yiguchen, follow me, the old drunkard called out and brought Yiguchen into the barren mountains. Finally, they arrived at a dark cave. After entering the cave, Yiguchen sensed the smell of iron and gunpowder in the air. Clearly, this was where the old drunkard usually forged. However, most blacksmiths had their own forging rooms. For example, Heavenly Forging Pavilion's Chu Shiqing had a well-equipped forging room. It was Yiguchen's first time seeing a cave as a forging room. Just as Yiguchen was doubtful about this cave-like forging room, he saw a scene that surprised him. The space in front of him suddenly expanded and then went down vertically. It was actually hollow. The pitch-black hole seemed bottomless. Yiguchen was slightly surprised. This is an extinct volcano, but with the special flames of heaven and earth, we can still stir up the remaining earth fire and make it convenient to smelt metal ores, the old drunkard said. Yiguchen nodded slightly. The old drunkard was indeed generous to use an extinct volcano as a forging furnace. All right, little Yi, let's cut the crap. You have to refine the heavenly sun Xianming fire first, old drunkard said. Yes. Yiguchen nodded slightly. In order to be able to forge a sword Dao weapon in the future, he also needed the help of the heaven and earth unique flames. Oh right, there's also this. Yiguchen seemed to have thought of something. His origin ring flashed, and the corpse of a huge demonic beast fell into the cave. The old drunkard was speechless. The demonic beast that guards the heavenly sun Xianming fire. Its crystal armor is extremely sturdy. Perhaps it can be used to forge a defensive spirit weapon, Yiguchen said. Even with his temperament, he couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Since he had already asked the old drunkard to help him forge a soft sword, asking him to forge a defensive spirit weapon was a little too much. However, to Yi Guchen's surprise, the old drunkard didn't have any reaction. Instead, he nodded slightly and said, "It's not impossible for me to forge a defensive spirit weapon for you. However, after this old man has something to ask of you." Senior's kindness to this junior is unforgettable. If there's anything, this junior will do his best. Yi Guchen cupped his hands slightly. He was sincere. Although the old drunkard didn't teach him anything about sword Dao, he had helped him a lot. Just the fact that he had forged the Calamity Dust Sword was a great favor. If he didn't have the complete Calamity Dust Sword, Yi Guchen's strength would drop a lot. Alright, don't be in a hurry to thank me. By the way, since this demonic beast guards the heaven and earth unique flames, its demonic core must be contaminated with the power of the heaven and earth unique flames. You can refine this demonic core and then refine the heavenly sun Shenming fire. Perhaps it will be smoother, the old drunkard said. Yi Guchen nodded slightly. With the old drunkard's guidance, he could indeed avoid many detours. He held the Calamity Dust Sword in his hand and took out the demonic core of the Ice Fire Dragon Lizard. Surprisingly, he took out 2 demonic cores, one for each head. One was crimson red, and the other was dark blue. Then, Yi Guchen calmed his mind and began to wrap his genuine qi to refine the 2 demonic cores. As for the old drunkard, he began to peel off the Ice Fire Dragon Lizard's crystal armor. Just like that, day after day passed. Refining a demonic core might not be easy for an ordinary warrior because the power of the demonic core was extremely violent. It was difficult to suppress it with genuine qi alone. However, Yi Guchen had too much energy in his body. 360 golden sword veins, 3,000 heaven-splitting sword souls, a wisp of devouring power, and a perfect body could suppress the power of the demonic core. Therefore, this refining process didn't cause any problems. In the end, the power of ice and fire circulated around Yi Guchen's body. The light on the surface of his body circulated between crimson red and dark blue. It looked extremely strange. Now, boy, wrap your genuine qi around the heavenly sun Shenming fire and refine it, the old drunkard shouted. Yi Guchen crushed the crystal that wrapped the heavenly sun Shenming fire. In an instant, the cluster of heavenly sun Shenming fire was very human-like. It seemed to sense that it was about to be refined, and the flames surged. If it were an ordinary warrior, not to mention touching the heavenly sun Shenming fire, just getting close to it would be in danger of being burned. However, Yi Guchen had a perfect body. In addition to the Vajra celestial body, he had also refined the Ice Fire Dragon Lizard's demonic core. It could be said that he had developed antibodies to the power of ice and fire. In an instant, just as the heavenly sun Shenming fire enveloped Yi Guchen, the power of the Ice Fire Dragon Lizard circulated around Yi Guchen's body. He was faintly immune to the heavenly sun Shenming fire. Boy, swallow the fire seed into your body, then refine it into your dantian. Circulate it in a major cycle and it will be considered a success, the old drunkard instructed from the side. As an artificer, he had also refined powerful rare flames of heaven and earth. Naturally, he knew how dangerous it was to refine such a fire seed. However, he could also see that Yi Guchen had hidden his strength deeply and had many tricks up his sleeve. Perhaps he really could refine the heavenly sun Shenming fire in one go. Yi Guchen gritted his teeth, but a faint groan of pain still came from the gaps between his teeth. Although there were various methods, rare flames of heaven and earth were not ordinary things. If they could be refined so easily, then wouldn't every artificer have one? However, the reality was that more than 90% of artificers did not have rare flames of heaven and earth. Such a flame was rare and powerful. It was definitely not easy to find. Even if it was found, it would be very difficult to refine. At this moment, Yi Guchen felt as if a red-hot soldering iron had been placed in his body, emitting a scorching heat that seemed to scorch his internal organs. Fortunately, Yi Guchen's marrow-cleansing scripture had been cultivated to minor completion. His internal organs were sturdy and protected by a mysterious force. Otherwise, just swallowing the fire seed would have seriously injured him. I don't believe. Yi Guqin gritted his teeth. The 360 golden sword veins in his body glowed brightly as he pressed the fire seed into his dantian. Did he succeed? The old drunkard could not help but watch as he felt the aura in Yi Guqin's body. But in the next moment, the old drunkard's expression changed drastically. Because Yi Guqin's entire body, including every pore, was emitting flames. This kid actually pressed the fire seed into his dantian. Isn't he courting death? The old drunkard stomped his foot in anger. Chapter 93. Pushing the fire seed into the dantian and pushing the fire seed into the qi si were two completely different concepts. The qi si was located in the dantian. If the fire seed was also pushed into the dantian, there would be no conflict between the two. But if the fire seed was pushed into the qi si, it was equivalent to putting a nuclear bomb into the heart. Moreover, given the tyrannical power of the heaven and earth flame, as soon as it entered the qi si, it would immediately ignite. Then, as the old drunkard had seen, one's entire body would be covered in flames. In fact, Yi Guqin's qi had been ignited, which was why it was like this. This kid, is he really stupid or does he not want to live anymore? The old drunkard sighed as he watched the rising heavenly sun Xianming fire completely engulf Yi Guqin's body. He could only vaguely see a figure that was becoming more and more charred. Sigh, could this old man have really misjudged? I originally thought that I had found a true genius of the sword Dao who could inherit that forbidden forging technique and fulfill my wish, but I didn't expect. The old drunkard sighed deeply. He had long seen that Yi Guqin was extraordinary. Whether it was his temperament, constitution, or comprehension, they were all superior. It was because of this that he gradually came into contact with Yi Guqin. But no matter what, it was all for naught. The old drunkard had seen people who had mistakenly pushed the fire seed into the qi si, but without exception, they all ended up very miserable. Qi flowed through the body, so the flames would also spread throughout the body, burning every vein, every bone, and every piece of flesh. The pain of being burned by the flames was unbearable for anyone. Not a single one of them managed to escape death. Perhaps refining an ordinary fire seed could save a life, but the heaven and earth flame was so tyrannical that it could not be extinguished unless the body was completely burned. But what surprised the old drunkard was that the figure wrapped in the heavenly sun Xianming fire did not let out a cry of pain or wail from beginning to end. It was as if he had already expected this situation. At the same time, the old drunkard vaguely saw Yi Guqin's hands move within the raging flames, forming a hand seal. Could it be that this kid is cultivating? A ridiculous and unbelievable thought popped up in old drunkard's mind. But what kind of cultivation method was this, that it actually required such a suicidal cultivation method? This was no different from suicide. As time passed, the shock in the old drunkard's eyes deepened. This was because he had actually sensed that Yi Guqin, who had originally been on the brink of death, was now faintly permeating with vitality. It was like a phoenix bathing in flames, undergoing nirvana and rebirth. Just how many more secrets does this kid have? For a moment, the old drunkard couldn't see through Yi Guqin. However, he had never seen such vigorous and pure golden true qi before. He had never heard of it, nor seen it before. However, even the old drunkard was shocked by the power hidden within the golden true qi. What kind of cultivation method is this kid cultivating? The old drunkard could not help but exclaim. However, he did not think too much about it. Everyone had their secrets. The old drunkard originally thought that Yi Guqin was stupid, but now that he thought about it, he was the laughable one. This kid. It seems that this old man's eyes were not wrong. Seeing that Yi Guqin was safe and sound, the old drunkard's hanging heart was finally at ease. The heavenly sun profound underworld fire gradually dissipated, and Yi Guqin stood up. The charred black dead skin on his body had fallen off, revealing his jade-like sparkling skin. This kind of skin would make any woman jealous. Coupled with Yi Guqin's handsome appearance, his temperament was even more outstanding. Yi Guqin's origin ring flashed, and he took out a new black robe and put it on. Feeling the powerful true qi surging in his body, Yi Guqin smiled. His cultivation had relied on the sea of Qi spiritual tribulation to make a small breakthrough and enter the sixth cycle of Qi refining. However, the biggest gain was still the golden sea of Qi. Now Yi Guchen felt that his strength had been greatly improved again. The power of the golden true Qi should be far beyond his imagination. Yi Guchen really wanted to find an expert to test it out, but unfortunately, he had other things to do. "Kid, have you refined the heavenly sun profound underworld fire?" the old drunkard asked with a burning gaze. He did not ask about Yi Guchen's golden true Qi. Obviously, he did not intend to ask. When Yi Guchen heard this, he also understood tacitly. He raised his hand slightly and snapped his fingers. A cluster of crimson-red flames wrapped in dark blue flames emerged. The extreme temperature of the alternating cold and hot caused the air around the flames to distort. Not bad. After refining the heavenly sun profound underworld fire, it will be a great weapon for both forging and fighting. The old drunkard nodded with satisfaction. "Next, let's start forging," the old drunkard said. Yi Guchen's eyes suddenly blazed. Was he finally going to start forging the soft sword? This also meant that Yi Guchen had the qualifications to comprehend the hard and soft sword essence. It was the hammer that the old drunkard had wanted to exchange for money. The moment Yi Guchen received the heavenly spirit vibrating hammer, his entire hand sank. So heavy! Yi Guchen was slightly surprised. This hammer weighed at least 1,000 pounds. Ordinary people would find it difficult to even pick up the hammer, let alone wield it. However, Yi Guchen had the power of the dragon elephant and a perfect body, so he could use it at will. When using the heavenly spirit vibrating hammer, inject true Qi into it and the efficiency of refining impurities will be higher, the old drunkard said. Yi Guchen held the heavenly spirit vibrating hammer and walked to the forging table at the side. Then, he began to forge the golden ring heavenly silkworm silk steel and the other treasured materials. It could be said that the most important factor in determining the quality of a spiritual artifact was forging. The quality of a spiritual artifact produced from 100 refinements, 1,000 refinements, and 10,000 refinements were all different. "Kid, in this old man's eyes, 100 refinements and 1,000 refinements are all trash. 10,000 refinements are barely acceptable, but that's all there is to it. If you want a good divine weapon, you have to forge it. So, my requirement for you is at least 10,000 refinements," the old drunkard said. Yi Guchen had no objections. He also wanted to forge a higher quality soft sword, so he naturally wouldn't be stingy. However, forging was easier said than done. It wasn't just swinging the hammer. One had to constantly inject true Qi, which would put a huge burden on the body. Even with Yi Guchen's temperament and cultivation, his forehead was sweating and his hands were sore when he reached 5,000 refinements. But he still persevered. Every time the heavenly spirit vibrating hammer fell, it would erupt with a vibrating force to remove the impurities in the treasured materials. Half a day later, Yi Guchen reached 10,000 refinements, but he didn't stop. 20,000 refinements, 30,000 refinements. In the end, even with Yi Guchen's strong physique and 100 feet of Qi, there were slight signs of depletion. 40,000 refinements, 50,000 refinements. The old drunkard's gaze was solemn. Yi Guchen's perseverance and dedication to the sword had exceeded his imagination. In the end, after 3 days, Yi Guchen's face was pale and his lips were as white as paper. He had poured all his energy, blood, and Qi into forging. The last hammer, Yi Guchen raised his numb arm, gathered true Qi, and slammed the hammer down for the last time. Boom! The sound of the hammer was like the wrath of heavenly thunder. Even the golden ring heavenly silk steel, meteorite iron, and other treasured materials were shaken and released an incomparably resplendent brilliance. It's actually the light of treasured materials. This kid really completed 10,000 refinements. Even the old drunkard was a little shocked. It wasn't that he hadn't completed 10,000 refinements before, but it was too difficult. Even the old drunkard rarely made 10,000 refinements in his life. He would only use 10,000 refinements when forging truly rare and powerful divine weapons. But in front of him, A youth who was forging for the first time could actually do 10,000 refinements. This kind of temperament, perseverance, persistence, and dedication shocked the old drunkard. Every piece of treasured material was like a golden crystal, emitting a resplendent brilliance. Kid, the next step is to fuse the sword embryo. After that, leave the rest to me, the old drunkard said. Yiguchen nodded and forced the last of his energy to fuse these treasured materials, including the mysterious silver heavy water, together to form a rough embryo. After that, Yiguchen had exhausted too much of his energy, so he sat cross-legged to recuperate. The rest of the process was completed by the old drunkard. But while Yiguchen was recuperating, he was also silently learning from the old drunkard's forging. To fuse spiritual runes, one needed to be at the divine soul realm and above to fuse spiritual power with true qi. Yiguchen couldn't do it yet, but he could observe the old drunkard's technique. It had to be said that after looking at it, Yiguchen felt that even the pavilion masters of the heavenly forging pavilion in the Saint Origin dynasty were not as good as the old drunkard. More importantly, the old drunkard's hands were slightly disabled. Yiguchen couldn't imagine what level the old drunkard's forging technique would reach if his hands weren't disabled. In the end, when the old drunkard fused the spiritual runes into the soft sword, he also used his heavenly flame. The purplish-black flame rolled endlessly, and the shocking temperature made Yiguchen sweat. It was even higher grade than his heavenly sun profound nether flame. Chapter 95. This old man's flame is the Purple Emperor's heavenly fire. Its grade should be a little higher than your heavenly sun dark fire, old drunkard said casually. Just a little higher? Yiguchen cursed inwardly. He had no doubt that the Purple Emperor's heavenly fire could instantly burn a life and death chamber expert to ashes. Time gradually passed, and Yiguchen's body had recovered by more than half. The soft sword that had exhausted Yiguchen's blood, sweat, and tears was also about to appear. Boom! Within the thick, rolling purple-black flames, strands of brilliance were emitted. Soon after, like a thunderclap, strands of sword light were emitted from the flames. That kind of sharp sword chi even tore apart the Purple Emperor's heavenly fire, causing the entire mountain to rumble and tremble. Yiguchen's eyes instantly lit up. That sword chi fluctuation made him feel a deep sense of anticipation. Finally, a soft sword broke through the Purple Emperor's heavenly fire, blossoming with boundless divine splendor. Yiguchen and Old Drunkard both focused their gazes on it. They saw that the soft sword was 4 feet long and as thin as a cicada's wing. It emitted an extremely resplendent silver color, and within it, there were also strands of golden lines. Obviously, it was because of the golden ring heavenly silk steel. At the same time, 3 spiritual patterns could be faintly seen on the sword, each emitting a different light. Feeling the sword chi fluctuation emitted by the soft sword, Yiguchen and Old Drunkard exchanged a glance, both having an idea. Upper grade spiritual pattern divine weapon. The quality of this soft sword had already reached the level of upper grade spiritual pattern divine weapon. Because of the meteorite iron, the Old Drunkard had integrated 3 spiritual tattoos into the soft sword. They were the Void Image spiritual pattern, Qi Gathering spiritual pattern, and Lightness spiritual pattern. Activating the Void Image spiritual pattern could turn the soft sword from silver to translucent, making it harder for the enemy to see the sword's trajectory. Qi Gathering spiritual pattern could condense Zhen Qi and unleash a powerful attack. Lightness spiritual pattern could reduce the soft sword's weight, making it faster. Give it a try, Old Drunkard said. Yiguchen could not hold himself back. He extended his hand slightly, and as if he had sensed something, the flexible sword suddenly fell into Yiguchen's hand. In that instant, Yiguchen felt a strange connection in his mind. This flexible sword's main 100,000 refinements were completed with your blood and sweat, so this sword is naturally close to you, because you were the one who created its physical body, said the Old Drunkard. Yiguchen came to a sudden realization. He finally understood why most of the legendary ancient sword emperors would give birth to their own famed swords. Because only then would their hearts be truly connected. This made Yiguchen even more determined to forge a sword that could accompany him to the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Although this flexible sword was not bad, it was only a spirit rune divine weapon. They could be friends, but not the love of a lifetime. However, Yiguchin was not in a hurry. To forge a famed sword, the right time, right place, and right people were indispensable. He did not force it. "Let's give this sword a name," Old Drunkard said. "This sword has been fused with meteorite iron, so its quality can reach a higher level. Let's call it Meteorite's Soft Sword." Yiguchin stroked the Meteorite's soft sword's blade, which was as thin as a cicada's wing, and then instantly drew his sword. The moment the sword was drawn, the wind and clouds shook. Even Yiguchin was stunned, because the speed of the sword was too fast. This sword's blade is as thin as a cicada's wing, light and fast. If the lightness spiritual pattern is activated, the sword's speed will be even faster. Old Drunkard nodded. Although this Meteorite's soft sword was not his best work in his life, it was still a divine weapon of 100,000 refinements. How could it be ordinary? Next, Yiguchin casually displayed his swordsmanship in the cave. The more Yiguchin used it, the more he felt that the Meteorite's soft sword was like an extension of his arm. With a flick of his wrist, the Meteorite's soft sword's blade suddenly bent, and the sword's aura actually made a circle and bombarded the side. This boy's talent in swordsmanship is really amazing. I really don't know how he cultivated. Old Drunkard watched Yiguchin's swordsmanship from the side and was secretly surprised. Of course, if he knew that Yiguchin's body hid a sword demon who had practiced swordsmanship for more than 40 years, he probably would not be so surprised. The more Yiguchin used it, the more carefree he felt. He vaguely felt a trace of the crepe myrtle's soft sword from his previous life. Of course, although the hard and soft sword essence was the first sword essence that the sword demon comprehended in his previous life, it was not something that could be comprehended in a short time. Yiguchin was not in a hurry. With the Meteorite's soft sword in hand, he would comprehend it sooner or later. "Senior, thank you for your kindness in forging." After he finished practicing, Yiguchin sincerely cupped his hands to Old Drunkard. Old Drunkard waved his hand and looked at Yiguchin. After a moment of hesitation, he opened his mouth and said, "This old man said before that I actually have a request." "Senior, there is no harm in saying it," Yiguchin said. "Presumably, you also know that this old man is a forging master. As for my name, I have long since abandoned it. Now, I am just a downtrodden drunkard. Do you know the reason for all this?" Old Drunkard said with a dejected expression. "I would like to hear the details," Yiguchin said solemnly. "It was just a bet. I lost the bet. I lost my name, my reputation, my future, and a pair of crippled hands. Most importantly," Old Drunkard said this and closed his eyes in pain. "I lost to her." Yiguchin was silent. At this time he really did not know what to say. Old Drunkard took a deep breath and said, "But later, that person said that if I was not convinced, I could nurture another disciple. He did the same and then made another bet." "I see." Yiguchin understood. Old Drunkard's request was for him to complete that bet. But that person is already a great figure in the 9 regions. If he accepts a disciple, he will definitely be an extraordinary person. Moreover, he has a God-tier forging technique. God-tier forging technique? Yiguchin was puzzled. If martial arts are the most important to a martial artist, then forging techniques are the most important to a forging master. Although forging techniques are not clearly divided into grades, there are still differences. Old Drunkard paused and continued, "The so-called God-tier forging technique is a forging technique that has a slight chance of being able to forge a divine artifact on the level of a famed ancient sword." A famed ancient sword? Yiguchin was really shocked. Although it was only a slight chance, forging a divine artifact on the level of a famed ancient sword was still very frightening. Old Drunkard smiled bitterly and said, "If he nurtured a true successor, he would naturally pass the God-tier forging technique to him. But I don't have a God-tier forging technique." Yiguchin understood. For a forging master, having a God-tier forging technique was too important. However, Old Drunkard's next words shocked Yiguchin. "Later, after losing the bet, I changed my name and became an alcoholic. I was depressed and wandered everywhere. In the end, I accidentally found a forging technique. What kind of forging technique? Yi Guchen's gaze sharpened. It couldn't be a god-tier forging technique, right? If so, he was too lucky. Forbidden forging technique. The old drunkard slowly spat out these words. Forbidden forging technique? Yi Guchen felt that something was wrong. It's this forbidden forging technique. The human soul refines the sword and duel cultivates the sword and life. Chapter 96. As old drunkard spoke, he took out a pitch-black jade slip. The entire jade slip was dark and mottled with a trace of blood, as if it had experienced the vicissitudes of life. This forging technique uses the human as the cauldron, the sword as the core, the creation of the world as the auxiliary materials, the sun and moon as the cauldron fire, the human soul as a sacrifice to the sword spirit, and the essence of the sword with blood and chi. Man and sword become one, sword and life dual cultivation. When Yi Guchen heard this, his eyes were filled with shock. How was this forging a sword? It was simply using the human as the nourishment to nurture a peerless sword. Old drunkard continued, a person can only forge a single sword using this forbidden forging technique. In other words, once the forging begins, it cannot be stopped. You are the sword and the sword is you. If the sword breaks, you will die. If you die, the sword will also collapse. This is sword and life dual cultivation. Yi Guchen sighed. He did not expect such a forging technique to exist in this world. It was simply unheard of. If there's a forging technique that can contend against a god-tier forging technique, I'm afraid it's the forbidden forging technique. However, this technique is too dangerous. If the sword you nurture is destroyed, there's almost no chance of you surviving. Even if you survive with heaven-defying means, you'll probably become a cripple. The old drunkard sighed. There was clearly a reason why this forbidden forging technique was considered a taboo. This forging technique was too dangerous. Even a sword cultivator who loved the sword would not be able to live and die with the sword. Little Yi, this old man won't force you. Although this taboo forging technique might be able to nurture a peerless sword, it's too dangerous. The choice is in your hands. If you're unwilling, I won't force you. The old drunkard shook his head. Although he wanted to defeat that person, there was nothing he could do if Yi Guchen was unwilling. However, to old drunkard's surprise, Yi Guchen's expression was not as doubtful, resistant, or dignified as he had imagined. Instead, there was a kind of light, a kind of excitement. This kind of excitement was a true swordsman's excitement for the sword. Wonderful, there is actually such a crafting technique. This crafting technique can only nurture one sword. Then, this sword must be a peerless divine weapon. It is not too much to say that it will accompany you for a lifetime. Yi Guchen was extremely happy. Old drunkard was stunned. Are you not going to reconsider? If the sword is destroyed, you will be destroyed as well. So what? For a true swordsman, the sword is his life. No, it is an existence more important than life. The person will die, but the sword will not. Yi Guchen's eyes lit up. This was a kind of absolute confidence. He was confident that by relying on this taboo forging technique, he would be able to create a peerless sword. Good, then I'll leave this forbidden forging technique to you. As for the bet, you don't have to worry. This old man has been here for so many years, so a few more years won't matter. However, I must warn you seriously that unless you really obtain a rare divine material, don't use this forging technique to forge a sword, the old drunkard said solemnly. Hearing this, Yi Guchen nodded solemnly. This forging technique could only forge a single sword, which would definitely be the sword that would accompany Yi Guchen for a lifetime. Since it would accompany him for a lifetime, he naturally had to choose the best material. The primordial swords nurtured by the Sword Emperor of antiquity were all forged with rare divine materials. That was why they could accompany the Sword Emperor for a lifetime. Yi Guchen also needed to find such divine materials before he could begin his sword forging plan. Yi Guchen was ready to leave after he had finished discussing some matters. Old drunkard also promised Yi Guchen that he would help him forge a defensive spiritual weapon using the Ice-Fire Dragon Lizard crystal armor. But the forging of a defensive spiritual weapon was more time-consuming. Yi Guchen did not plan to continue staying here, so he left Mt Tong Tian. Yiguchen planned to head to Shang River City to purchase some healing elixirs and other elixirs before reporting to Bloodthirst Tower. Just as Yiguchen was about to reach Shang River City's gate, it suddenly started to drizzle. The rain was dense and fine, falling like a curtain. It was very cold as it dripped onto his body. Unknowingly, there was no one around. Only the rain fell, drenching Yiguchen's black robe. Yiguchen's senses were very sharp. After cultivating the perfect physical body, he was even more sensitive to the void and could detect many auras. This rain was not normal. It carried a faint sword concept. "Who is it? Come out." Yiguchen stopped in his tracks and said with a slight sigh. In the distance, a figure slowly walked over in the rain. He was dressed in a pitch-black robe, outlining his slender body. He wore a bamboo hat on his head. Yiguchen narrowed his eyes slightly. "Do you like rainy days?" The bamboo hat man sighed. His voice was hoarse but pleasant. Yiguchen frowned slightly. This person who pretended to be mysterious was even more troublesome. After thinking for a while, Yiguchen said, "Did the Xia and Bei families invite you here?" As expected of the sword sex Yiguchen. The man smiled and slowly raised his hand to catch the rain. "So you're here to kill me?" Yiguchen sensed the bamboo hat man's cultivation level. In any case, it was definitely not lower than his. Moreover, Yiguchen felt a faint threat from this man. "If I can kill you, I will." The bamboo hat man smiled again and suddenly snapped his fingers. All of a sudden, the rain that fell from the sky suddenly became more rapid, and the curtain of rain was mixed with dense sword chi. "This is a sword array?" Yiguchen suddenly reacted. He immediately used the protection of Luo Tian, and a protective Vajra shadow appeared on the surface of his body. Clang! A series of collisions rang out as the sword aura mixed in the rain bombarded the illusory figure, causing ripples to appear on its surface. "I'll let you have a taste of my falling rain sword array first." The bamboo hat man smiled. "Falling rain sword array? You sure, Cho?" Yiguchen came to his senses and looked at the bamboo hat man with a grave expression. Yu Shicho was the most mysterious assassin in the Blood Listening Tower. He was ranked 4th on the Heaven Pride list and possessed unfathomable strength. "Heh, I know who you are. Not only are you Yiguchen of the Sword Sect, but you're also the Sword Demon of the Blood Listening Tower." Yu Shicho revealed Yiguchen's identity. "Since you know, why did you attack? Don't you know the rules of the Blood Listening Tower? Assassins can't attack each other." Yiguchen frowned. "I can't attack you, but I owe the Xia family a small favor in the past. After this attack, we'll be even. Moreover, I want to see how powerful the sword sect is in the Beichen Manor," said Yu Shicho. "Good, that's what I was thinking." Yiguchen's eyes glistened. He had just broken through, past the first minor tribulation of the Qi-Si spiritual tribulation, refined the heavenly sun Xianming fire, and obtained the meteor soft sword. Yiguchen also wanted to test his strength and see the gap between him and Yu Shicho, who ranked 4th on the Heaven Pride list. Chapter 97. Falling Rain Sword Formation, Killing Rain. Yu Shicho formed a seal with his hands, and the rain suddenly changed. What was originally a fine drizzle turned into a torrential downpour in an instant. An even denser rain of swords flew toward Yiguchen. Seeing this, Yiguchen's eyes flashed. He held the Calamity Dust Sword in his hand and used the Boundless Heaven Sword art. The sword trajectories of the Calamity Dust Sword intertwined with each other, forming an impenetrable sword net that blocked the rain of swords. However, no one would be able to withstand such a dense attack. "I have to break this falling rain sword formation or attack the person controlling it." Yiguchen knew that he could not delay any longer. He moved his feet and used the shadow step. His body left behind afterimages. He was so fast that he could pass through the dense rain of swords without hurting his body. "Smart kid." Seeing Yiguchen rushing toward him, Yu Shicho sneered. He moved his feet at the same time, using the shadow step as well. Yiguchen raised his eyebrows. Obviously, Yu Shicho had also obtained the complete shadow step sword art. Otherwise, he would not have been able to use the shadow step. Falling rain sword formation, death of rain. Yu Shicho changed the formation again. The transparent rainwater suddenly gathered together like rivers flowing into the sea. Finally, it turned into a shimmering rainwater sword. The entire sword looked like it was made of rainwater, but it contained an extremely sharp sword aura. Yu Shicho flicked his finger, and the rainwater sword broke through the curtain of rain, whistling toward Yiguchen. Yiguchen did not dare to underestimate it. He poured his vigorous golden true chi into the calamity dust sword. All 42 vessel meridians lit up, and the thunderstorm spiritual tattoo was activated. Aurora Quick Sword, Daybreak. Yiguchen used the ultimate move of the Aurora Quick Sword. In an instant, the sky darkened, and in the darkness, a ray of light appeared. It was not a ray of light, but a ray of sword light. Boom! The two ultimate techniques collided. Lightning radiance shot out in all directions, shaking the heavens and splitting the earth. Yiguchen's dust of calamity shook, directly dispersing the rainwater longsword. Then, the sword's momentum did not stop, shooting towards Yu Shicho. Falling rain sword formation, thousand sword rain. Seeing Yiguchen break his killer move so easily, Yu Shicho's expression changed slightly. He immediately used his killer move. In an instant, the rain between heaven and earth seemed to have stopped, frozen in the void. Then, every drop of rainwater elongated and transformed into a foot-long dagger. Perhaps the power of a rainwater dagger was not great, but in this world, there was rain everywhere. If all of it turned into a dagger, it would be a rain of destruction. Kill! Yu Shicho formed a seal, and the thousand-sword rain whistled down, covering the sky and earth. There was not a single gap. Even a bird would not be able to fly out, let alone a person. Yiguchen had no intention of dodging. His sword did not change, but he urged the sky-splitting sword soul inside him. 400 rays of green sword chi whizzed out, colliding with the sword rain that filled the sky. What kind of technique is this? Even Yu Shicho was shocked by Yiguchen's sudden move. With the sky-splitting sword soul breaking through the obstruction of the sword rain, Yiguchen's sword pierced towards Yu Shicho without any obstruction. Yu Shicho calmly faced it. He stretched out his 10 fingers. On each finger, there was a ring, and on each ring, there was a sharp sword that was about a finger long. Yu Shicho's true chi exploded. Vigorous true chi poured into the swords between his fingers. The finger swords exploded with a blinding light. Cold sky palm. Yu Shicho struck out with his palm, colliding with Jie Chen's sword. His 5 fingers curled up, and the 5-finger swords perfectly blocked the sword. Yiguchen's eyes flashed. He did not expect Yu Shicho to have such a strange weapon. Yu Shicho lifted his head slightly, revealing a pale and thin face under the bamboo hat. It gave off a somewhat feminine feeling, like a snake in the dark. He suddenly stretched out his other hand. The 5-finger swords shot out like 5 flying swords, piercing towards Yiguchen's face. Yiguchen was shocked. Yu Shicho was indeed worthy of being ranked 4th on the Heaven Pride list. His various strange techniques were impossible to guard against. However, Yiguchen remained calm. Just as the 5-finger swords were about to pierce Yiguchen's face, Yiguchen suddenly placed his other hand on his waist and pulled. With a clang, a soft sword appeared. It was the Meteor Soft Sword. The soft sword was also known as the belt sword. It was incomparably flexible and could even be worn around one's waist like a belt. If used suddenly, it would catch the enemy off guard. Clang, 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 clang. 5 consecutive clangs rang out. The 5-finger swords were sent flying by the Meteor Soft Sword. At the end of the finger swords, there was a transparent thread connected to the ring on Yu Shicho's finger. Boom! The two retreated at the same time. Soft sword. Interesting. If Yu Shicho had been playing with Yiguchen like a cat playing with a mouse at the beginning, he was now truly taking Yiguchen seriously. No wonder you're ranked 4th on the Heaven Pride list. However, the battle has only just begun. Yiguchen sheathed the Tribulation Dust Sword, only holding the Meteor Soft Sword. He and Yu Shicho were still probing each other. Yiguchen did not need to reveal a trump card like his dual swords. Sensing Yiguchen's rising battle intent, Yu Shicho's expression turned solemn. This is our first battle, Yiguchen said as he held his sword horizontally, slowly stroking the blade with one hand. He felt a sense of harmony as if they were connected by blood. The fallen star soft sword seemed to have sensed Yiguchen's fighting spirit. It buzzed and vibrated. A sharp sword essence spread out from the sword's body. That soft sword? Yu Shicho frowned as he looked at the meteor soft sword in Yiguchen's hand. He instinctively sensed that the soft sword was extraordinary. Go! Yiguchen swung his sword at an extremely fast speed, just like a meteor shooting out in a flash. Such speed! Yu Shicho was astonished. He spread out his 10 fingers and 10-finger swords flew out, surrounding Yiguchen. Yiguchen's soft sword vibrated like a snake. It struck left and right, and in the space of a breath, it sent the 10-finger swords flying. The finger swords retracted into Yu Shicho's ring, but Yiguchen's sword was already close to his body. So fast? Yu Shicho was shocked. He was shocked by the speed of Yiguchen's sword. Boom! His genuine chi suddenly exploded, and Yiguchen was forced to take a step back. Satisfying. At that moment, Yiguchen only felt this way. The meteor soft sword in his hand felt like a part of his body. The feeling of being connected by blood was indescribable. No wonder the ancient sword emperors wanted to create their own peerless divine weapons. In Yiguchen's heart, he was even more determined to use the taboo forging technique to create a peerless divine weapon. Moonfall. Yiguchen's soft sword stabbed forward, drawing an arc in the air like a crescent moon. Clang. The soft sword collided with Yu Shicho's finger swords, producing an ear-piercing sound. High-grade divine weapon with spiritual inscriptions. Yu Shicho was secretly shocked. His finger swords were also divine weapons with spiritual inscriptions. When 10 of them were combined, their power was comparable to a mid-grade divine weapon with spiritual inscriptions. However, the quality of Yiguchen's soft sword was beyond his expectations. The numbness from his fingertips told Yu Shicho that Yiguchen was not an easy person to deal with. You are indeed the sword sex Yiguchen. We will meet again. Yu Shicho's body was like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. He took a few steps back and was about to leave. You appeared out of nowhere and attacked me. Now you want to leave so easily. How can it be so easy? Yiguchen's eyes flashed. He held the meteor soft sword in his hand. His body froze for a moment, then suddenly exploded. Shadow assassination sword technique. Vanishing shadow. Seeing Yiguchen's killing move coming, Yu Shicho did not panic. He raised his hand, and a strange sword concept filled the air. Then, the rain that filled the sky suddenly exploded toward Yiguchen as if it had a mind of its own. This is... Yiguchen raised his eyebrows. Chapter 98. The rain that filled the sky rushed towards Yiguchen. Its power was many times stronger than before. Yiguchen's heart sank. He changed his sword technique. The tip of his sword drew an extreme circle that could contain and swallow all things. It was the Tai Chi sword technique. The rain of swords was drawn into the Tai Chi circle. Yiguchen's body shook as if he had been struck by lightning. The hand that held the fallen star soft sword cracked. This sword momentum was actually so powerful. It was so strong that even with Yiguchen's current cultivation level, he could barely withstand it. What a strange defensive sword technique. Seeing that Yiguchen had withstood this killing move, Yu Shicho's gaze turned serious. He did not want to fight anymore. His body quietly retreated, disappearing into the rain. Return. Yiguchen let out a low growl. His hand that was holding the sword suddenly loosened. The rain of swords that filled the sky instantly rebounded. Rumble. Every drop of rain seemed to have the power to pierce through gold and crack stone. An ordinary warrior below the 5th transformation chi refinement realm would have been turned into a bloody sieve in an instant. After withstanding this terrifying move, Yiguchen slowly panted. Looking around, he could no longer see Yu Shicho's figure. This power, it can't be wrong. Yiguchen's eyes shone. That energy was the energy of sword intent. Previously, Yu Shicho also controlled the formation to unleash a rain of swords. However, the power was not as strong. Furthermore, when he unleashed this attack, He did not control the formation. He merely raised his hand. Yiguchin analyzed. When Yu Shicho used this move, Yiguchin could faintly feel the sword will. The reason why it was hidden was because Yu Shicho had not fully activated the power of the sword will. He had only revealed a trace of it. But with just a trace, he was able to unleash such power. Even Yiguchin was surprised. This was sword will. What Yu Shicho has learned must be water sword mind, Yiguchin guessed. Moreover, he was certain that Yu Shicho hadn't used his full strength. Yu Shicho still had many trump cards up his sleeve. As the fourth on the Heaven Pride list, how could that be all he had? Of course, Yiguchin didn't use his full strength either. The spirit-devouring mystic art, the little Ashura sword formation, the 3,000 heaven-ripping sword souls, and even the 10,000 deities tribulation. Yiguchin was becoming more and more interested in sword intent. However, this also served as a reminder to Yiguchin. If Yu Shicho, who had grasped the water sword intent, was already so troublesome, then Xia Yubing, who had also grasped the water sword intent, was clearly no pushover either. In this trip to the 18 blood prisons, I must obtain the Azura sword intent. Yiguchin's eyes flashed with a resolute light. Comprehending the hard and soft sword intent required luck, but to comprehend the Azura sword intent, one only needed to reach the last level of the 18 blood prison. It's time to prepare to enter the 18 blood prison. Yiguchin sorted out his thoughts, then directly set off. He directly headed for the 18 blood prison's location, the Chill Wind Hills. Because of the previous blood mission to exterminate the Situ family, many assassins had completed the mission, so the 18 blood prison would be opened at once. There were still a few days before it opened, so Yiguchin wasn't in a hurry. He slowly hurried along, and at the same time began to comprehend the hard and soft sword intent. In his previous life, the sword demon Dugubai had comprehended a total of 4 sword principles. Hard and soft sword principles. Edgeless sword principles. All creation sword principles. Selfless sword principles. Sword principles were the advancement of sword intent. One had to first comprehend sword intent before being able to further comprehend sword principles. In terms of the 4 sword principles that the sword demon had comprehended, it was clear that the further he went, the more profound his realm became. Even the final selfless sword principle could be used by the sword demon to resist the might of the heavenly tribulation. In this life, Yiguchin also began to cultivate the simplest hard and soft sword principle. Of course, simple was also not simple. If sword intent could be comprehended so easily, then wouldn't every swordsman be able to comprehend sword intent? But until now, Yiguchin had only met a handful of people who had comprehended sword intent. However, Yiguchin wasn't in a hurry. He already had the talent of the sword demon, and with the seed of the sword heart, as well as some experience from his previous life, he would comprehend these 4 sword principles one by one. In the boundless forest, Yiguchin sat cross-legged on the crown of a tree, holding the meteor soft sword in his hand. He didn't move at all, and the sword edge that was as thin as a cicada's wing rippled gently with the breeze. In front of the waterfall, Yiguchin swung his sword, but it didn't break the water flow. Instead, it allowed the soft sword to merge perfectly with the water flow, without a single splash. In this way, Yiguchin advanced towards the Chill Wind Hills, while silently comprehending the hard and soft sword intent. At the same time, Yiguchin also began to cultivate a rather famous sword principle from his previous life, the Golden Snake swordsmanship. This sword principle was created by a Jianghu expert. In this world, the Golden Snake gentleman's sword principle was probably only equivalent to a Xiantian sword principle. Although it wasn't a particularly exquisite sword principle, the Golden Snake swordsmanship's ingenuity lay in its ability to comprehend the soft sword. Moreover, there were no inferior sword principles, only inferior swordsmen. If the Golden Snake swordsmanship was comprehended to a profound level, its power would definitely not be weak. With Yiguchin's talent of the sword demon and the seed of the sword heart, it wasn't too difficult to comprehend the Golden Snake swordsmanship. In just a few days, Yiguchin had comprehended the Golden Snake swordsmanship to a small success. Moreover, he had comprehended the Golden Snake swordsmanship's unique skill, the Golden Snake Shadow. At the same time, his comprehension of the hard and soft sword intent deepened. After a few days, Yiguchen finally arrived at the Chill Wind Hills. Although the chill wind in the Chill Wind Hills was powerful, with Yiguchen's current cultivation, it wasn't difficult for him to avoid it. Soon, Yiguchen went deep into the Chill Wind Hills. Not long after, the blood token transmitted the order for the magistrate to gather. However, the magistrate who transmitted the order wasn't the demon magistrate, but the underworld magistrate, Yu Li. It seems that the demon magistrate didn't escape unscathed from the battle with Patriarch Situ, thought Yiguchen. The demon magistrate had clearly paid a price to injure Patriarch Situ and make him flee. Soon, Yiguchen changed into the sword demon's attire and arrived at the gathering point. There were already several assassins gathered there. More than half of the assassins who participated in the previous blood mission were not present. They were obviously dead. However, Nightingale and the red-haired ghost were among them. With their battle prowess on the Heaven's Pride list, it wasn't difficult for them to survive. The red-haired ghost's eyes darkened when he saw Yiguchen. This was because the Blood Tower's rules forbade the assassins from attacking each other. Those who disobeyed the rules would be killed without mercy. Therefore, the red-haired ghost hoped that Yiguchen would die in the Situ clan. On the other side, Nightingale's eyes lit up when she saw Yiguchen. She knew that the sword demon's true identity was the sword sex Yiguchen. Therefore, she was also aware of the commotion Yiguchen caused at the Sword Quest tablet. If Nightingale was still somewhat unconvinced of Yiguchen before, she was now sincerely convinced of Yiguchen's talent in the Sword Dao. Yiguchen nodded slightly when he saw Nightingale, ignoring the red-haired ghost. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.